It all begins with a pointy-eared being casting a summoning spell. Meanwhile, in Korea, people go about their daily lives, and the protagonist is just another bored young man. He can't stand the school routine anymore. Suddenly, he encounters a magic circle that leaves everyone paralyzed. He is then summoned to a place full of pointy-eared beings, conversing, and realizes they speak another language. Despite the confusion, the boy was sure of one thing: he had managed to escape his mediocre routine. The red-haired individual then cast a simultaneous translation spell and asked if the protagonist knew him, but the boy was completely disoriented. He was furious with the pointy-eared beings ignoring his presence to discuss who was the strongest. The grumpy blonde individual decided to leave, and the boy was astonished to see him simply disappear. Suddenly, everyone vanished, leaving the protagonist only with the redhead who summoned him. Since the two didn't know each other, the pointy-eared being decided to introduce himself as Riyard, from the Red Dragon clan. The boy was amazed to notice that the redhead was a real dragon, with a tail and reptilian features. Despite his nervousness, he introduced himself as Lee Kyul, a 19-year-old high school student. The dragon explained that the boy was in his lair, on the continent of Arsenia. He stated that he was responsible for bringing him there with his magic. Riyard wanted to prove that his clan was the most powerful, and the only one capable of performing the summoning magic, especially to Croesus, the golden dragon who always deemed him incapable. Lee Kyul was outraged to be used as a guinea pig, and asked to return home, but Riyard didn't know how to reverse the spell. Desperate, the protagonist pleaded with the dragon until Croesus returned, informing that their lord was calling the redhead. Lee Kyul waited, worried about the possibility of being trapped in that world, until the dragons returned, with Riyard blaming the boy for the reprimand he received from his leader. Riyard explained that he should resolve the situation, otherwise he would be poorly regarded by the other draconic clans. Lee Go began to cry profusely, and the dragon commented that the magic was complicated, but with luck, he could manage to send the boy back in approximately 50 years. Croesus, noticing Lee's despair, suggested that the human himself open a portal to return. However, the young man had no idea how to do that. Riyard then said that the boy should become a wizard, as if it were the easiest thing in the world. A mana stone was inserted into Lee Kyul's body, which would allow communication between him and Riyard for 200 years. Feeling invigorated, the protagonist decided to learn magic, especially when Cephaliers from the Silver Dragon clan approached. She revealed that she would be responsible for the humans' training. This made Lee Kyul feel more excited, due to the friendly appearance of the Silver Dragon. Riyard became jealous of their closeness, and he began to impose difficulties in the boy's training, which required him to reach level 9 to open a portal. But Lee Kyul decided to try and followed Cephaliers, who promised to develop the boy's skills to level 5 in 100 days. They began the training with the boy already receiving a reality check through a mana injection. The goal was to strengthen him quickly, while the instructor boasted about her teaching methods. But Lee Kyul, exhausted, asked to give up. However, the instructor did not relent, and implemented an extremely disciplined routine. This left Kyul overwhelmed with so much magical information absorbed at once. After much effort, he managed to form the first mana circle, reaching level 1. Gradually, the boy learned to fight and meditate to balance his energies. The progress made Cephaliers quite proud. At the end of the 100 days, Lee Kyul reached level 5 and received a staff from Cephaliers as a gift. The young man was fascinated, especially because the staff could transform into a sword made of dragon bone. With the end of the lessons, Cephaliers sent the boy back to Riyard and wished good luck to his dedicated pupil. Riyard was surprised that the boy was still alive, but he informed him that to reach level 9, Lee Kyul would need a dragon heart. The boy was confused, and Riyard explained that dragons had 2 hearts, one to pump blood and the other to pump mana, which they called the dragon heart. Riyard told him that the ancient dragon Archmage, before dying, split his dragon heart into 4 parts, known as the Tears of the Earth, and if Lee Kyul gathered them, he could reach level 9. Hopeful, the main character asked where these tears were. The red dragon gave him a DTS, a kind of magical GPS, to guide the young man on where to find the dragon hearts. Then he opened a portal and sent the main character out of his castle. But before Lee Kyul left, Riyard gave him a ring that was the emblem of the House of Delphin, where he was consecrated as a knight. He mentioned that in this house was his sword, known as Blackstream, in which a dragon heart was embedded. Then suddenly, he opened another portal and sent the young man again, but warned that there was someone who would help him on this mission. Lee Kyul was feeling desolate, until a noise caught his attention, where a fearless girl was facing a group of orcs. So our main character took his staff and decided to take action. But the girl was so fierce that she left the orcs traumatized, and Lee Kyul realized that in fact it was the orcs who needed help. The girl stared at our hero, who felt afraid, but soon she calmed down and said she was waiting for him at her father's request. And Kyul noticed, from the redhead's features, that she was Riyard's daughter. The girl introduced herself as Lucy, the half-elf, and the main character said she could call him LK. The two shook hands and headed to the city of Condemned, while the girl mentioned she was reading a book about humans, until a cart with a stench of carrion passed by, and Lucy explained that the people there traded monster meat. The two decided to have a snack, and LK paid attention to a conversation from a group talking about mercenaries, money, and a lord. until a very strong man accompanied by a blonde woman asked to sit with them. Makan was a mercenary, and his partner Elysian, a priestess. The man asked if LK was a mercenary, but the young man replied he was just a traveler. Suddenly someone shouted dissatisfied with the Lord, and LK wanted to know what was happening. Makan explained that 5 months ago, monsters invaded the village of Aiton, so the Lord recruited many mercenaries, who gave their lives to restore peace. However, the Lord delayed everyone's payment. LK, who was just listening, didn't even notice that Lucy was eating his food, and suddenly several guards entered the inn to escort Reynold, the clumsy son of the Lord, who was tasked with delivering a message to those present. Makan and the others stood up to listen, and the Lord's son, with an arrogant expression, said he would pay double what he had promised. However, anyone who complained would go to prison. Then, Elysian couldn't hold back and called the noble a liar, and the other mercenaries supported the priestess to also demand the money. Reynold approached Elysian and said he would pay everything if she granted him some intimate favors, but the woman promptly struck the repugnant man's face, who ordered the guards to arrest her. But Li Ke, fearless, stood in front of the woman. Li Ke watched the noble have a fit of rage. Then Lucy delivered a flying kick to the young master and began to beat him mercilessly. The mercenaries felt motivated and went after the guards. The tavern owner, poor thing, only thought, oh my dishes, until a lightning bolt electrocuted the Lord's men, and everyone was startled because our hero had revealed his wizard powers. The mercenaries were happy, and the main character, with a fireball in hand, suddenly exploded the armored enemies. With everything resolved and the guards detained, Makan and Elysian thanked our hero for the extra help. But Lucy was indignant with the flattery, as she had done more than half the work. Elysian demonstrated her healing power, which left Lee quite surprised. Meanwhile, the mercenaries were telling Makan that one of the guards had fled. LK remembered Riyard talking about the seed he planted in his mana circle to absorb the dragon hearts. Then, he took the DTS to see where he would start his search, but Lucy shouted that they should finish off the Lord and his son once and for all. Lee assumed the man would send reinforcements, since his son was captive. As expected, Captain Campbell appeared, asking if the Lord's son was okay. Lee Kuehl was chosen to go talk to the captain. Hostily, the captain accused the mage, but LK explained that the noble was the one who started it. Until the MC noticed something strange around, he activated his night vision to identify the guards walking on the tavern's terrace. He summoned his magic torpedoes, and commented to the captain that it wasn't honorable to attack from behind. The captain, seeing his men floating, ordered his knights to attack, but Lucy appeared with the young master, who ordered the captain to withdraw with his men, and Makan appeared on the roof with the Lord also imprisoned. Lee Kuehl then commented that now it was possible to talk civilly. A few hours before the reinforcements arrived, Lee Kuehl talked to Makan about the next steps, and asked Elysian to perform a task. The priestess was a bit scared but accepted, since she had caused the confusion. Then Cronwell, the local guildmaster, said he would help the young woman. Meanwhile, Lee Kuehl asked Lucy to get the map of the mansion where the Lord lived, because the protagonist's plan was to kidnap the Lord as well. The tavern was surrounded, but Campbell could do nothing, and Lee Kuehl tried to negotiate for the Lord to pay what he owed. But the man laughed in the protagonist's face. This left Elysian quite outraged, as she had witnessed the deaths on the battlefield. The Lord pretended to be moved by the story, and said he wouldn't punish anyone, but warned that he wouldn't pay a single coin to those involved, leaving the mercenaries even more outraged. And Lucy, who was already bored, wanted to quickly end the situation. Then the Lord, feeling the blade on his neck, decided to make a deal, and suggested they settle the situation in a trial by combat. But Lee Kuehl found it absurd to have to fight for something that was already the people's right. Then the Lord proposed that if they won, he would pay double, but if they lost, Lee Kuehl would have to work for him for a year. Cronwell accepted the challenge, even against the protagonist's will. Then the Lord explained that the dispute would take place in the Colosseum, in a best-of-3 format. The protagonist saw that, according to the rules, mages couldn't fight, and Makan explained that this would bring an unfair advantage. Then the day of the battle arrived, with the crowd excited, and the Lord received the mercenaries exuding confidence, until Felix, the high priestess and judge, ordered everyone to take their places. Then she struck her staff on the ground and announced, "Let the games begin." The first fight was Cronwell's, who was eager to enter the battle, until a knight fully equipped with heavy armor entered the arena, and with his lance he struck Cronwell. He fell unconscious, while the knight reared his horse in celebration, but Lee was outraged that it was allowed to use mounts in the middle of combat. The second victory also went to the Lord's team. He celebrated while the people booed him, until Lucy entered the arena, very enthusiastic, and the combat between the half-elf and Lily was announced. A threatening troll, her presence left both the protagonist and the audience astonished due to her immense size. The creature drooled like a hungry beast, but the warrior just wanted to finish the confrontation quickly so she could eat. The monster charged at Lucy. She unsheathed her sword serenely, and leaped over the opponent, shouting Riyard's name. Then, her sword was enveloped in flames, and she struck a blow against the troll, who lost the use of her right arm. The monster tried to advance, but the half-elf quickly dodged, also disabling Lily's other arm, and thus she pierced the beast, who had no time to defend herself. The Lord was incredulous for having lost the bet, but Lee Kuel felt hope and understood why Riard had chosen the girl to help him, although Lucy found the fight too easy. The Lord complained, claiming that Lucy cheated by using a fire sword. But for Lee Kuel, the worst part was the noble having placed a monster in the arena. However, the priestess validated the fight and granted victory to Lucy. Then she told the protagonist that the sword had been a gift from her father, and Lee asked if the blade could be used by someone else, but Lucy informed him that only she could activate the spell. The Lord called the next fighter, Osborne, and Lee Kuel was shocked to realize that the man was a mage, but the hooded man asked the Lord to enter the arena, only if the fight was at a disadvantage. Makan entered the arena, and Kuel was surprised that the warrior wasn't using weapons. The night advanced, and the mercenary's body began to emit a golden glow, and he transformed into a huge tiger. This even scared the opponent's mount. Makan charged at the knight, and broke his lance with a single blow, and he knocked the opponent down with a strong right attack, ensuring victory for the protagonist team. The Lord, furious, ordered the last fight to begin. Then the mage Osborne entered the arena, and Lee, realizing that the rules now allowed it, jumped into the combat. For the unprecedented fight between mages was about to begin. Osborne asked why the protagonist was fighting, and LK replied that he was seeking the dragon heart. But the opponent simply invoked his spells full of hatred, and fired magical torpedoes at the boy, who promptly pulled out his staff and created a protective sphere. But Osborne seemed determined, and attacked again with fire arrows. Then Lee Kuel, in response, activated his ice spears, which collided with the enemy's magic, causing a huge flash. Osborne, without rest, conjured a double attack, and Lee Kuel realized that the opponent was above level 5, so he prepared his defense, which froze the mage's sphere, and when the second attack's ray came, nothing hit him, leaving Osborne speechless, while the audience cheered intensely, and the Lord was desperate for the money he would have to pay. Osborne suspected that the protagonist was hiding his abilities, but in reality, it was Sephir's staff that was above average. The mage tried something stronger with his flames, but Lee Kuel didn't move a muscle, trusting in the strength of the staff, which dispersed all the fire. Then, he told Osborne that his magical repertoire had many flaws, and launched the true fireball, which traveled like a comet towards the man. But Osborne managed, with difficulty, to block it with his shield, and he wondered where the boy had learned such magic. But the truth is that humans learned all kinds of magic through the dragon lineage, and Sapphires, knowing this, taught Lee Kuel everything he knew about human magic, through consecutive shocks for mana expansion. However, the MC owed no explanations to the thin-mustached mage, who decided to use his supreme magic, and conjured an Isotronich. Then, Lee Kuel also showed his supreme magic, conjuring a Fire-Atronich. The creatures began to fight, leaving the audience excited with the visual spectacle. LK decided to use more mana to strengthen his summoning, which turned the ice monster into a hailstorm. Then, Osborne surrendered and asked if LK belonged to the inner circle of the Tower of the Wise, but the MC, who was unaware of such an order, only wanted to know if the opponent would accept defeat. And even with the Lord's denial, Osborne gave up fighting, and the mercenaries celebrated with LK, while the Lord nearly had a collapse. The duo continued their journey with money in their pockets, until a cart approached. But it was Makan, who out of curiosity, was heading in the same direction as the heroes, so they hitched a ride, and Lee Kuel found it pleasant to have company on the journey. Lee took a look at the DTS to locate the dragon heart, but Lucy revealed that she could detect the artifact when they were close. When they stopped the carriage, Kuel said they were looking for an artifact his master had sent them to find. Then Makan asked if the boy was from the inner circle of the Tower of the Wise, and Lee Kuel was curious, as it was the second time he had heard about it. Makan was incredulous that the boy didn't know about it, since he was a mage, and explained that it was a large tower in the center of the continent, where mages learned the 7 disciplines that made up the inner circle. Lee Kuel asked if Makan knew the Marquis of Delphin, from the kingdom of Elune. Then the mercenary showed a map of Arsenia, and he said that the path to the Crowngaus temple, where they were headed, passed by the kingdom. The MC wanted to know why the mercenaries were going to the temple, and Elysian revealed that she had received a prophecy. Makan noticed that the weather was changing, and decided to camp. Then, while they were having dinner, Lucy heard a noise, and a young man appeared asking for help, but suddenly threw a dart at Lee Kuel. Lucy protected him, but complained about the MC's lack of reflexes. The attacker struck again, but the mage conjured a shield, and archers appeared among the trees with orders to eliminate him. Then Lee Kuel blocked the attack once more, and decided to retaliate with poison, leaving the bandits stunned. Lee Kuel extinguished the campfire, and when everything went dark, he fired his magic missiles. Suddenly, one of the enemies appeared from the rear, but the mage promptly eliminated him with his wind blade. After the victory, Lucy used incisive methods to ask who had sent them. Then the leader of the group replied that the heroes should not have meddled with the Dark Brotherhood. But after another blow from the half-elf, the man confessed that they worked for a dark mage who used slaves in the vein mines. Makan commented that it would not be wise to confront a dark mage. However, Lucy was determined to take revenge on this class of mages, because dark mages did not use mana to perform magic. but instead made contracts with demons, offering living souls in exchange for power, and Lucy wanted to hunt them down at any cost. Lee was shocked when Elysian told him that dark mages used elves as sacrifices. The priestess decided to report the situation to the sacred temple, and Makin suggested they head to the village of Hajun Min. The next day, they continued their journey, taking the bandits with them, and by dusk they arrived at a village, where they were stopped by the guard. Then, Makin informed him that he was there to meet Karek. When the man appeared, he was pleased to reunite with the mercenaries after 2 years. He asked Elysian to help him with the patients. The woman went to the location, and saw that the work would be arduous. Karek introduced the group to other mercenaries. The protagonist did not get along well with Luki, the local mage. Then the mercenary Jenny said they were investigating the dark mages when they were ambushed. Makin informed them that there was a mine of magic stones in the Vane Mountains, which made the young Luki worried about smuggling. However, the most dangerous thing for Leaky was the proximity of the mountain to the village. Karek considered telling the villagers, but Makin pondered that it would only make them worried. Then Leaky will stepped away, as he just wanted to return home and have a normal life, until he heard a noise in the bushes. Then, a little girl named Marie appeared, asking to touch the protagonist's staff. Lee made some lights appear, which left the little girl fascinated and jumping with joy. The hero asked where the girl's parents were, but she cried as she told him they had been killed by cruel men. Then Kiwul conjured a magical carousel, and the radiant girl said she wanted to learn magic to defeat those who killed her parents. Lucy approached, having heard a child crying. Marie wanted to touch the elf's ears, which she vehemently refused. Jenny announced that the priestess had finished the healing. Marie ran ahead, almost crying. Leo, who had been healed, wanted to know about his squad, but Jenny informed him that they had all died. Then the mercenary swore he would avenge his friends. However, Elysian asked the man to rest, until the group heard a crash. The village was in flames. Lee remembered Marie and went looking for her, while Makan and the others prepared to protect the villagers. The protagonist saw many innocent people dead, but continued to search for the little girl. She had been captured by 2 bandits, and one of them decided to take her for a sacrifice. But a magic sphere hit the guy square in the face. Lee Kuel shouted for Marie to run to him, while they were surrounded by dozens of wrongdoers. However, the young man was furious, and unleashed arcane magic on the enemies. Lucy also joined the fight and drew several bandits into the battle, while the mage Luki and Jenny positioned themselves to provide support. Seeing 2 mages in action, the bandits decided to retreat. Kuel asked Karek to take care of Marie. The little girl did not want to be abandoned again, but Kuel promised he would return, and Lucy said she would accompany the protagonist on the hunt. With the imminent defeat of the bandits, the dark mage revealed himself and introduced himself as Lupus, the second disciple of Marcus. Then he conjured ice spears, while Lee Kuel conjured an arcane cannon. The clash between the 2 magics caused a great explosion. The protagonist asked Makan and Leo to take care of the bandits, as he would face the abyssal mage on equal terms. The struggle between ice and fire continued intensely. Lupus, despite his indignation at the protagonist's power, said he would not accept defeat, but his new attack had no effect. Then Lee Kuel commented that the mage had only chosen dark magic because he was weak. The enemy felt the blow and launched an ice bomb, but the hero eliminated it calmly, and judged that the demon with whom Lupus had made a contract was a fraud. Lupus, consumed by fury, ordered his henchmen to attack Kuel. However, he didn't even notice when Lucy stealthily charged. Lupus created a shield, but the girl summoned her flaming sword, which pierced the blockade, hitting the enemy squarely. The bandits noticed Lupus's death and decided to retreat. The hero, exhausted, understood that the path of magic required a lot of effort. Lucy approached to support the protagonist, but he knew that on this path there was no room for rest. Meanwhile, Jenny was futilely confronting another mage with her arrows, until he launched a double fireball, forcing Lupi to conjure a protective shield. However, the multiple attacks continued, and when Lupi was about to give up, an ice wall appeared in front of the heroes. Lee and Lucy arrived to provide support. The protagonist wanted to know what was happening, and Lucy explained that they were facing Glowing, a level 5 mage. This made Lee Kuel more confident. However, the enemy analyzed the newcomers, and noticed that Lucy wielded a magic sword. Then he threatened to tear the girl to pieces. Next he launched a more potent fire magic, but when Kuel was about to counterattack, the half-elf stepped forward and declared that she would fight the mage. Then she advanced with her flaming sword and landed a flying kick on the man. Kuel realized how powerful Riard's sword was, and the girl, furious, could feel the elven blood spilled by Glowing's hands. But this time, Lee Kuel took responsibility for the combat, and in a hidden corner, a mysterious old man curiously observed our hero mage. The fire attacks continued, and Lucy almost got burned in her charge. Then the MC asked for patience, as the opponent's magic was not infinite, and when the pace of the attacks finally slowed, Lucy charged forward without hesitation. But another magic suddenly appeared, preventing the half-elf from attacking. Then the old man revealed himself, and Lucy recognized him as the dark mage, who had overestimated his disciples, Glowing and Lupus. Glowing then kneeled, asking for forgiveness, and reported that Leakies had eliminated the other mage. The old mage wanted to know who our hero was, but the boy, as always, liked to provoke the enemies. Then the Dark Mage cast an extremely powerful spell against Kuehl, who quickly invoked a protective barrier, but the light was so strong that our hero almost couldn't contain it. Lucy and the others were stunned by the flash, and when the light ceased, Kuehl was standing, ready for the counterattack. A new elemental dispute ensued, but our MC knew that the old mage had more mana than him. The mage wanted to know where Kuehl had learned his magics, and the young man, having heard so much about it, replied that it was from the inner circle. Then the old Marcus commented that the order was outdated, as he himself had been one of them. And even absorbing all the magical formulas, he couldn't break his own barrier, deciding to seek more power from other sources. But Kuehl remembered his journey, and assured that only effort does not yield reward. However, Marcus was not in the mood for conversation, and even with Kuehl aware that it would be difficult, he needed to reverse the situation to return to his world. Kuehl knew that fighting using only magic would be a disadvantage, but he couldn't do anything other than block the continuous attacks. Then, the MC felt a hand on his back. It was Lucy, asking him not to give up. The other mercenaries also decided to help, with Lucy doubling the force barrier. Kuehl felt a glimmer of hope, and at the end of the magic, everyone attacked. However, Marcus was undeterred and launched lightning bolts at Lucy, who absorbed the magic with her sword. But the power was such that the half-elf couldn't withstand it. The mercenaries tried to get closer, but the mage was relentless, until Jenny grazed him with an arrow, and Lucy enchanted the mercenaries' shots. While the elf attacked from the flank, she ended up slipping in the mud, and when Marcus was about to finish her off, the great tiger appeared, which despite its ferocity, couldn't get close to the man, and fell with a huge wound on its belly. Lucy shouted for Maken. Then Kuehl concentrated all the mana into his staff, and summoned a gust of wind, which as it approached Marcus, transformed into a fire tornado. And for the first time, the Dark Mage felt threatened. Marcus conjured an ice wall to defend himself, which wasn't enough to stop the flames that spread everywhere. But, amidst the smoke, the Dark Mage emerged furious, and when he prepared to attack, he realized he couldn't use magic, and Kuehl saw it was his time to conjure the classic fireball, which exploded on the old mage's chest. Then Glowing lifted the master to flee, but when Lucy was about to chase them, Kuehl thought it better to let them go, until the sunrise brought victory to the heroes. However, Kuehl knew the mage had revenge in his eyes, and hoped to be ready when he encountered him again. Jenny thanked Kuehl for the victory, but RMC blushed, and commented that it was a victory for everyone. Carrick approached to see how everyone was, while McCann and Leo went to receive care from Elysian. Jenny hugged the MC, asking for help, and the young man noticed his own heart was racing. Then, suddenly, Lucy dragged the mercenary away and said she would help her, and told the young man to take care of the staff. Then, Li Yunqing saw Marcus's staff on the ground and handed it to Lucy, who thanked him surprised. Then he looked around sorrowfully, as the village had been completely destroyed. The heroes went to see Elysian in the infirmary, but the woman didn't respond. And, when they opened the door, they saw the priestess as a hostage. The bandits had captured the woman and the little girl Marie, and ordered them to let them escape. But suddenly, Marie bit one of their fingers, while Elysian freed herself from the other, immobilizing the bandit, who almost cried in regret. At that moment, Kuehl tied up the others with magic, and Lucy severely punished the wrongdoers, so they wouldn't cause more problems. Elysian wanted to know how the battle had gone, and when Lei Kei told her they had won, the priestess and Marie jumped into the MC's arms in celebration. Marie thanked him tearfully for defeating the men who killed her parents, and Lei Kei said he had promised to do so, thus creating a familial bond with the girl. After the confusion, Elysian went to take care of McCain and Leo, and was happy to be able to heal them. Then organized the place, as the infirmary line was chaotic, and Leo, if he could, would crush Marcus for the harm he did to the population. The heroes deduced that the mages hadn't returned to the mines. Then Kuehl realized he couldn't abandon them, and gathered the heroes towards the Vane Mountain, while Lucy nudged the leader of the Dark Brotherhood to show them the way. Kuehl felt sorrowful for having killed people, even in the name of justice, until the bandit indicated they had arrived, but no one could see anything due to the thicket. Then the MC activated his night vision, and saw bandits gathered at the mine entrance. Lucy forced the leader to lie, saying they had arrived with the villagers, but the prisoner quickly rejoined the Dark Brotherhood members, and Lucy regretted not having hurt the guy more. The bandits recognized Kuehl for having defeated the Dark Mage, but the leader wouldn't surrender easily. Only him, as all the others dropped their swords. Lucy liked it, and took the opportunity to give the bandit another beating. Makan and Lucy were tasked with watching the bandits, and protecting the villagers, while the other heroes entered the mine, which was filled with mana stones, and gold gathered in chests, until Lucy found mana crystals, which left our MC fascinated. Leo commented that the crystal was as valuable as the Calente crystals, the most important mine in the kingdom. Lucy supposed the Dark Mages had collected at least 500 kilos of stones, and for that they used a lot of forced labor, which for Leo, meant a threat to all kingdoms. And Kuehl found himself involved in a case that completely diverted him from his goal. Makan suggested they inform the local lord of the events, then task Leo with carrying out such a task. as he knew the man wasn't just a simple mercenary, and yes, a knight who fought for the honor of those who died in his name. Leo mentioned that reporting magical stone mines to the authorities yielded a great reward, and Makan asked the knight to use it to help the villagers, so Leo swore by his honor that he would do so. Back in the village, Carrick thanked the heroes for all their support and invited them to dinner. The table was abundant, just the way Lucy liked it. Jenny approached and wanted to know what Kuhl's next steps would be. Then the MC replied that he would go to the Kronglaus temple. Meanwhile, she would accompany the young Luki to the tower to report the incident with the dark mage. Leo thanked Elysian for her care and kissed the young woman's hand, which made her embarrassed. And when the knight left, Lee Kuhl said he hoped for a romance between the two. But the woman didn't like the joke. Then, Luki and Jenny also said their goodbyes, and Kuhl felt envious of the boy placing his hand on the mercenary's waist. However, Luki only had eyes for Lucy, and was dazzled when the elf waved at him. Marie approached tearfully at Elfkay's departure. He promised to return to see her soon. Then, Carrick said he would take care of the little girl, and so they departed in the carriage with a long farewell. Lee Kuhl asked what troubled the priestess, and Elysian said she feared the dark mages might start another battle, like the one 100 years ago, which took place at the sacred castle. Elfkay didn't know the story, so Elysian decided to elaborate. She told that, a long time ago, the world was in chaos, and a king reached out to the dark mages. Thus the terrible plant empire was born. Until Ragdoom, the master of the dark mages, foreseeing the emperor's betrayal, placed a magic circle around the castle, and activated it, bringing pain and suffering to thousands of people, thus opening a portal that connected to the demon world, which awakened and brought monsters into the world, starting the Sacred Castle War. Lee Kuhl pondered about the portal, as it was exactly what he sought to return home, until Elysian continued to tell that, in the moment of greatest chaos, 5 heroes emerged, and they fought a difficult battle, until the knight managed, with his sword, to defeat the mage Ragdoom, and thus they established great influence on the continent. Kuhl was surprised to learn that the representative of the hero's magic was the head of the Caresis Tower. Therefore the golden dragon Caresis he saw upon arriving in that world was the mage Lionel, one of the 5 heroes. The boy pieced the puzzle together and concluded that Riard was also the knight of the mythical group. Leiki asked Elysian the name of the knight's sword, and the priestess replied, Black Stream. Lee Kuhl almost shouted, Eureka, until Lucy woke up and swore she heard her mother's name. And when the girl said Trinity, the MC was surprised. But for the girl, it was quite normal that her mother had been one of the 5 heroes who fought in the Sacred Castle battle. Elysian was worried that the dark mages might try to summon Baal the demon duke again, something they failed to do in the past, even composing a song in honor of the demon. But, after the discovery of the mine and all those magical stones, everything was possible for the priestess. Lee Kuhl swallowed hard and decided to believe it was impossible to awaken a demon, but internally, he just wanted to return home before that world came to an end, and he died in the process. Lee Kuhl was having difficulties writing, while for Lucy it was an extremely easy task, which made the MC green with envy. After the training, Makan decided to leave, and the priestess was quite excited to reach the commercial city of La Rochelle. Lee Kuhl was amazed by the size of the city, which looked like a large metropolis from the medieval era. The heroes went to Sherman's Inn, a friend of Makan who welcomed them warmly, and our MC was very happy to be able to take a hot bath. The group was eating when Makan wanted to know if Lee Kuhl's artifact was nearby. The boy took out his DTS and, noticing it was closer than he thought, asked what was north of La Rochelle, and Makan replied that it was where the fairy forest was located. With that, Lee Kuhl was all excited about the possibility of seeing the fairies, but Elysian said it wouldn't be that easy, as the place bordered the spiritual world, and Makan added that generally those who entered the place rarely managed to leave. Lee Kuhl almost panicked, as most of the dragon hearts were on that side, and Lucy, who only heard half of it because she was focused on eating, replied that she would go too, without even knowing where. Despite the difficulty, Lee Kuhl did not think of giving up, so he suggested that the mercenaries head to the temple, while he and Lucy would go to the forest. Until Elysian stood up, indignant. She took a deep breath and sipped her drink to maintain control. She reprimanded the hero, saying he couldn't underestimate his companions like that. Then, furious, the woman said she would accompany the duo on the mission. Makan agreed with the priestess. After all, Lee Kuhl had helped them a lot. Lee Kuhl felt relieved, despite not wanting to bother them. Makan mentioned that someone had come out of the forest alive, so they should talk to her, and they went to speak with Sherman, as his wife was part of the Thieves Guild, and at her peak, had the nickname Kitten. Suddenly Lee Kuhl was startled by the size of the woman who appeared suddenly. Then, the MC presumed that a more suitable nickname for the woman would be that of a giant bear. The robust woman then decided to take the heroes to the guild, and upon arriving at the place, Lee Kuhl thought it was misleading advertising for a thieves guild to be called treasure hunters, but they entered and found a bald man who greeted them with great humor. The enormous woman, after mentioning they would see the master, went to the bookshelf and unlocked a secret door. She mentioned that only 2 people could follow her. After leaving their weapons with Woodall, the bald man, Lee Kuhl and Lucy followed the secret path with Kitten, and the MC asked if the person who had survived the forest also had an exotic nickname. Then, the woman explained that the survivor was unique and stealthy, like a palm civet. They continued down a corridor that, according to Kitten, had many exits but only one entrance, and LCK understood that one couldn't easily escape from the Thieves Guild. They reached a door, and when they entered, LCK was surprised by the number of rogues scattered around the place, until Master Kamel showed himself happy to see Kitten again. She asked for information about the palm civet, and the man, good-humored, said he would give the information for free, for the years of friendship. Then, to LCK's astonishment, the master revealed that the girl was in royal detention. This left Sherman's wife quite worried. The master asked if Kuehl was willing to buy information for 30 gold coins, and, after some encouragement from Kitten, Lee Kuehl ended up giving in, even suspecting he had fallen for a scam. But the master's information was valuable, and he said that a wizard and a half-elf were being sought. The duo was petrified, as their hunters were linked to the dark wizard, and the reward was huge. And suddenly, Kitten and the heroes found themselves surrounded by thieves. Lee Kuehl quickly activated a spell to start an attack, but everyone knows that a wizard using a fireball in a closed space is an invitation for a critical failure. The master then calmed the situation, and said it was just a test, and Kuehl, suspicious of the man, decided to leave immediately. Kitten guided the heroes to the royal detention, but judging by the way the officer was laughing, Leikie wasn't very confident about the conversation's progress. However, Inspector Laddick was a friend of Kitten, leaving our hero surprised, but the woman explained that she helped the man in the past to get his promotion. Walking through the cells, Kuehl was curious, as a prisoner was staring at him, but the rogue ordered them to continue, as they couldn't talk to detainees without authorization, until they reached Palm's cell, and the girl didn't seem very willing to talk, until she recognized Kitten, who introduced the heroes. Kuehl found it outrageous to spend 100 coins to release Palm Civ, but the girl seemed more irritated than him for being detained for 4 days. Kuehl tried to introduce himself to Palm, but the girl didn't like formalities, especially because she was hungry, so the group decided to go to the inn, leaving our hero behind, who considered the attitude a great affront to his good heart. The girl ate voraciously, and when she was finally satisfied, she decided to listen to what our hero had to say, but when Lee mentioned the fairy forest, Palm Civ simply changed the subject and was already about to leave discreetly. Then the young man got irritated, and said that if she was going to leave, it was better to return the bail money. However, he made a deal. If she talked about the forest, the debt would be settled. With no other option, the girl wanted to know the reason for the interest in the forest, and Kuehl asked how deep she managed to enter the place. Palm then said that she had been to the forest 3 times, even getting to know the fairy palace. Kuehl was fascinated and wanted to know more about the place, but the girl was not willing to talk. Then Lucy reminded her of the 100 coins, and Palm realized she wouldn't be able to get out of this situation without revealing what she knew. Palm said that her father once worked for some merchants near the forest. Then she said that he was helped by the fairies, but the man went mad and practically forgot the family. He went in and out of the forest several times to gather rare herbs and sell them, although her sick mother received nothing from that money, until the fairies asked him to take the girl to the forest, and so she visited the place 3 times. But recalling her father was very upsetting for Palm. Then Leoke said they were planning to go to the forest, and the rogue thought it was madness on the hero's part. But Kuehl revealed that he needed to find a magical item, so Palm analyzed the team that would embark on this dangerous mission and assumed they would not succeed. With that, Lucy took the opportunity to ask what the girl's price was to accompany them, and surprisingly, the economical LK showed a bag full of gold. Palm then pushed the limit and asked for 1,000 gold coins, but as our protagonist had won 2,500 coins from the Lord, he thought about negotiating, and the rogue, who was great at bargaining, lowered the price by half before Kuehl made his offer. Thus they closed the deal, but the protagonist decided to hand over the money to the thief only at the end of the service. Then she warned that at any sign of danger she would leave the group behind, and she went off to rest because the next day would be long. The new day arrived, the carriage was ready, and there was no sign of the girl, but Lee K could only think about the dragon heart to increase his power. The heroes got tired of waiting for the thief, as they did not trust her, but as they were saying goodbye to Sherman, the rogue appeared, leaving the protagonist flattered, but Palm made it clear that she was only there for the money, and Kuehl found her excessive honesty very blunt. The girls got into the carriage, and a sense of rivalry emerged over who was in charge. This made Kuehl decide to continue the journey as a coachman alongside McCann. They reached a crossroads, but Palm warned that they should just go straight, as they had placed the sign to divert people from the forest. They proceeded cautiously, and Kuehl found the forest quite peaceful, but Palm gave an ironic smile, highlighting the young man's naivety. As they advanced, the air became heavy, and Lucy detected a change in the mana of the place. Then the carriage stopped, and Palm handed a compass to LK, and so the heroes reached the entrance to the fairy forest. Palm took out an adventurer's journal that belonged to her father, but Kuehl couldn't understand anything written in it. The girl deduced that he couldn't read, as many thieves were illiterate, and the young man was indignant at the insinuation, as he was a mage. The girl then pulled out a small bag with a powder and put it on her tongue, The protagonist found it strange, but Palm explained that it was fairy dust. The inexperienced young man thought the girl had ground up real fairies, but Elysian took a deep breath and explained that it was dust collected from the creature's wings. The rogue poured the powder into the lamp and informed them that they should follow the direction the dust indicated. Makan tried to understand the mechanism, and Kuehl deduced that the powder was attracted to the spiritual world, and Palm realized that although the boy seemed foolish, he was intelligent. The carriage continued until it began to get dark, and Makan suggested they camp, so they lit a fire, and our hero found it strange since they hadn't been attacked by anyone yet. Meanwhile, Palm commented that the place was different from the last time she visited, but Lucy, with her elven instinct, already felt something different in the air. Suddenly, various lights began to fall like snow, and Lucy said they were seeds that hadn't yet transformed into spirits. Makan and Elysian were amazed by what they witnessed, until a light flake landed on the half-elf's hand, and so they learned that the fairies no longer existed there. Kuehl was outraged because a fairy forest without fairies made no sense at all. Then, the lights began to move. However, the light speck that landed on Lucy did not follow them. The elf decided to name it LS. The speck started circling Lucy, and our protagonist suggested she talk to the spirit since her mother was an elementalist. However, Lucy said she had no talent for that, being skilled only in combat. LK asked if the elf had any new leads on the Dragonheart, but she still had nothing. The day dawned, and Kuehl gave half the money to Palm, who had already woken up demanding her share. She needed to pay for her mother's medicine. This made her think angrily about her father. Then, she turned her back and said they still had 4 more days of travel to Mirror Lake. As they advanced, the trees changed color, until a flash almost blinded our mage. He thought they had already reached Mirror Lake, but Palm informed him it was an ordinary lake. So they decided to camp while contemplating the crystal clear water, but they were caught by surprise by a noise, which left everyone stunned. A majestic unicorn was trotting calmly. Makan commented that they were intelligent and became tame with pure girls. So Leke, just out of curiosity, wanted to know if this worked only with girls, but the animal did not take kindly to our mage. With Lucy, however, the unicorn was extremely affectionate. Palm seized the opportunity to try to pet the creature, but when Elysian went to pet the animal, it simply neighed and became restless. And for this reason the rogue judged that the priestess was not so pure, but she assured them she was completely innocent. Although the group did not believe her, then she burst into tears at the animal's rejection. But Lucy, who spoke its language, explained that the unicorn had only become alert with the human's approach. Then Elysian, relieved, ran to hug it. Makan explained that the unicorn's horn had powers against evil and cured diseases. This piqued Palm Civit's curiosity, and when the protagonist noticed the rogue's look, the priestess commented angrily that if they removed the animal's horn it would die. And while Palm defended herself saying that was not her intention, the unicorn told Lucy it would help them on their way. The carriage followed the unicorn, and LK missed his phone to take some pictures of that scenery. Then he reflected that even upon returning he would never forget that place, and therefore he needed the Dragonheart. The group reached Mirror Lake, and LK was amazed because the place was almost the size of an ocean. Then he approached the shore to contemplate how crystal clear the water was. But suddenly he began to feel thirsty, and when he went to touch the water, a whip struck him and stopped his hand. Palm quickly pulled the rope, pulling the boy away from the lake's surface, and she shouted that if he touched it he would be sucked in forever. Then she took a stick to show how it worked. However, almost like magic, the girl saw that in her reflection she was still holding the stick. Kuehl conjured a fireball and threw it into the lake to test it. He watched in amazement as the ball disappeared, while Elysian assumed the lake connected to another dimension. Leke, who had studied the reflection of worlds, said it would be impossible to navigate that surface. They needed to know how to cross it, but that point was the farthest Palm had advanced in the forest. The girl then took her father's diary to take a look. While Lucy watched the small light LS move away, the rogue suggested the mage make them fly, but the protagonist said it was risky. And when our hero was losing hope, Lucy saw something in the distance, and noticed that LS was being followed, but LAK couldn't identify what it was due to the mist. Then he activated his magical vision, and glimpsed several Pegasi flying towards them. The animals landed near the heroes, and Lucy said they were there to give them a ride. The protagonist promised he wouldn't die, as they took off. Until, after the initial thrill, he saw that everything was calm. But suddenly, the animals advanced into the mists, and the heroes found themselves safe and sound on the other side of the lake. Li Yunsheng saw on the DTS that they were in the right place, until Lucy pointed to an imposing castle, where she could sense the presence of the Dragonheart. They walked through a garden, and Palm bent down to pick some magical herbs. But Li Yunsheng was not willing to anger the fairy queen over a theft, and when Elysian also scolded the thief, it was enough for her to give up. The castle was well maintained, and Li Yunsheng commented that the place seemed empty, but Lucy was undeterred, until the main gate opened on its own, and the group was greeted by the fairy queen, who, despite her mysterious look, introduced herself as Li Yun, the last fairy. Li Yunsheng found it strange that the fairy was the height of a human, but Li Yun explained that this way they could have a conversation as equals. Then, she guided the heroes to the hall, and offered them a fairy tea. The woman seemed pleased to be able to talk after a long time of solitude, and revealed that LS, along with other spirits, reported that she would receive visitors. So the wizard was surprised at how quickly information spread in the forest. The fairy wanted to know why they were there, and Li Yunxing, despite pondering, thought it fair that everyone knew what he was seeking, and he said he was looking for the dragon heart. But as he spoke, the fairy remained serene, as if the artifact was closer than the hero could imagine. The companions were surprised by Li Yunxing's quest. Then the fairy asked the group to leave the room for a moment, because she needed to have a private conversation with the wizard and the half-elf. Makan led the ladies against their will out of the hall, and when they were alone, the fairy asked what Li Kuel would do if she refused. The young man was completely disconcerted by the question, but luckily the queen was just joking. Besides recognizing that Lucy was Riard's daughter, Li Kuel was perplexed by the fact that the fairy knew the red dragon, and the queen recalled that Riard, along with other dragons, helped cure the fairy's disease. She touched the necklace and wanted to know why the protagonist wanted the last remnant of the good Ekrion in that world. Teal was embarrassed to ask for something so valuable for personal use, but he began to recount his tragic story, while the group waited impatiently outside. After hearing everything, Li Yunxing supposed that Riard was then researching dimensional portals, but according to Lucy's information about her parents' vacations, Li Yunxing thought the dragon was researching another type of portal. However, without hesitation, the fairy removed the necklace and extended it to the hero, explaining that in fact, the artifact had no magical use for her. Li Yunxing was speechless, until he noticed Palm Civet entering the room. He was furious that the girl had listened to the conversation, but she swore she was just impatient, so he preferred not to go into details with the intrusive thief, and opted to ask Li Yunxing why she was the last of the fairies. Li Yunxing then explained that when the phenomenon of dimensional portals occurred, the fairies were able to manifest in the material world. However, many acquired the size of a human, and lost their wings, thus becoming what everyone knew as elves. Liyun was stunned by the revelation, even knowing the subtle connection between the two races. The queen continued, explaining that those who did not become elves had difficulty adapting. So along with other races, they built the fairy palace, which symbolized a peace agreement. However, with the arrival of the dark wizard Ragdoom and the battle of the sacred castle, the fairies decided not to fight and hid. Then, out of fear of an invasion, they used nature spirits to protect the forest. But the demonic mana continued on the continent, leading to the disease that killed half of the fairies. However, the queen, sorrowful, understood that this was a punishment for turning their backs on the world. Therefore, she created a dimensional portal, so that the surviving fairies could return to being spirits of light. Makin felt the queen's pain, and Palm wanted to know if the queen had news of her father. She was surprised, as Li Yun remembered her from when she was still a child, and knew that the thief felt a tremendous void due to her father's absence. Although the girl vehemently denied it, Li Yun commented that invading the forest was a one-way path, but Li Gyul interrupted her, as the man had come out alive. The queen then explained that the barrier was meant to prevent interaction between the races, and that only she managed not to be infected, thanks to her power as the fairy queen. However, the main mode of contagion was the dust falling from the fairy's wings. To Palm's despair, who had ingested the dust, and to the group that tried to leave the hall. But Li Yun explained that contagion only occurred after 3 minutes, and the dust the girl carried was over 10 years old. Palm then wanted to know what had happened to her father. After all, Li Yun explained that he had been infected, and had probably infected her mother as well. Palm felt deceived because her father had told her it was pneumonia. Then Li Yun confirmed that demonic mana was almost impossible to cure, and if it were discovered, the whole family would certainly be quarantined. Li Yun recounted that the man sought the fairies for help, imagining that the unicorn's horn would save his beloved wife. However, when a unicorn dies, its magical power vanishes with it, and the best way to remove the horn is when the animal is asleep. But for that, a virgin girl is needed. So Palm understood that her father only took her to the forest to try to save her mother, and she wanted to know why the fairy didn't appear to meet them. The queen explained that the fairy who found them had fallen ill, but there was another reason to avoid contact, because Camille, Palm's father, had harvested rare herbs in the forest. Then some merchants found out and asked him to guide them to the location. Camille refused, of course, but was threatened, so he left, leaving only his diary and the fairy dust behind. He watched the men extracting the herbs without permission, until he heard the little fairy calling him, and apologizing for causing pain to his family. Camille noticed the fairy was sick, but still, she tried to give him a eunesia flower. However, the bad men saw the fairy, and did everything to capture her. Camille tried to stop them but was injured by one of the merchants and fell dazed. The wrongdoers searched him and found the fairy dust, which began to spread in the air. Palm couldn't believe that if they had the eunesia flower, her mother would be cured, and Lilian revealed that it was the most potent healing flower in the fairy world. But Palm didn't want to accept such a story, believing that Camille abandoned the family due to an obsession with fairies. LK wanted to console the girl as she assimilated the new information. Then she concluded that she had been deceived by the merchants and decided to take revenge on all of them. Lilian merely observed the girl express her feelings, and said that the heroes would encounter difficulties on their journey, but if they were together, they could overcome them. for there the Dragon Society was forming. Lilian then held Kuel's hand and said that they were all friends of the fairies. The group left the palace heading towards the Pegasi, and LK kept observing the necklace. Then he felt a bit desperate because he had no idea how to absorb the dragon heart. Since the dragon Acreon divided them into 4, each race named the artifacts with a sacred name. There was one embedded in Riard's Blackstream sword, and one in Lee Kuel's hands. The Pegasi continued their journey, and our MC had doubts if it really was a dragon heart, but Lucy assured him vehemently that it was. Palm could only imagine how much money the artifact could be worth, and without any ceremony, asked for the necklace as a gift. And Lycian also felt attracted to the jewel, but a priestess could not adorn herself with such luxuries. Then LK sincerely said that the young blonde would look very pretty with the piece, making her blush, and so the priestess decided to try it on. Lucy wanted to know if Kuel also felt the dragon heart in the jewel, but the effect was null. Then the artifact began to glow in the MC's hand, and he remembered that Riard had planted seeds of the same harmony in his mana circle. Then he began to feel the connection, and he asked the half-elf how to absorb it, but the girl got excited, stating that he was the mage there. Until the absorption began, and the group wanted to know if the boy would return home. But Kuel explained that he needed the 4 jewels, and he didn't like how Palm was interested in the stones. Days passed, and our MC was analyzing the DTS, until Asuyam approached and asked how it worked. The mage explained that you just needed to put a little mana, and the object would track the dragon hearts. When searching for the next one, Lucy informed that she would only identify it once she finished absorbing what she already possessed. The carriage continued on its way. Kuel commented to Macon that he was thinking of returning to Riard's house. Meanwhile, inside the vehicle, Lucy was conversing with the little light LS. Kuel then heard the elf ask to stop the carriage. She revealed that Camel's tomb was nearby, startling the rogue upon hearing her father's name. Palm commented that she suffered greatly from the man's disappearance. Lucy then asked if the rogue would like to visit the site. Despite hesitating, Palm decided to go. This made the group proud of her decision. Upon arriving at the location, they witnessed several skeletons. Palm recognized one of the merchants by the pendant. Makan supposed there had been a fight before they died, and Elysian suggested they bury them. Kuril and Makan then dug a large grave and placed them all inside, complete with a cross and everything. When the priestess went to pray for the bodies, Palm thought it was a waste of time, as she wanted to see her father. The rogue observed the tomb adorned by the fairies, and asked Elysian to say a prayer, returning the diary in fairy dust, so that Camille could rest in peace. After the funeral, Lee Kuel suggested that Palm take the man's remains home, but the rogue thought the fairies had worked hard to set up the tomb. Moreover, the queen gave her free access to visit the site whenever she wanted. Kuril wanted to know if the girl would still work for the merchants. Outraged, she vehemently denied it. The protagonist was concerned, and asked if she had forgiven her father. Trying to change the subject, she said yes, but at the moment she just wanted to eat a big meal with meat. The mission came to an end, and Kuel gave the rest of the payment to the rogue. She promptly took the money and asked if there would be an extra payment, but Lee Kuel, indignant, thought the girl didn't deserve it. The protagonist was exhausted, while Lucy just wanted to eat, so they set off back to La Rochelle, with Lucy drooling from sleep, and the protagonist cleaning her like an older brother. But suddenly the elf woke up and shouted for the carriage to stop. Markham was left puzzled by the situation. Lucy revealed she felt something dangerous nearby. Everyone was on alert, as the energy was from dark mages. Kuel told Palm he had fought some of them before. He was irritated when she said that if she had known she wouldn't have come along. The mage crouched to detect the evil. Suddenly, several fireballs flew toward them, but Lee Kuel promptly conjured an ice wall to defend himself, until one of the enemy's attacks hit the carriage. The heroes tried to find ways to protect themselves. Palm narrowly avoided being hit by arrows that stuck in the ground. Others whizzed through the air, but Lee Kuel stopped them with magic and counterattacked with a tornado. Then, Lucy, determined, charged at the enemy, who seemed to enjoy the heroine's boldness. Lee Kuel, sensing the arcane presence surrounding the place, recognized an energy similar to Marcus's and quickly invoked his force field. While a powerful mana formed among the trees, Kuel tried to stop that whirlwind. When the magic ceased, he supposed the opponent was at least level 6. Then 3 mages revealed themselves, pleased to meet the boy who almost defeated Marcus, especially since he was just a youth. Even realizing the man's demonic energy was intense, the protagonist said he was happy with the reputation. However, the mage promised to destroy Lee Kuel for interfering with his dark plans. Kuel knew he would face a heavy attack. The dark mage was outraged that Kuel was even stronger than his companions. The young man was worried because Lucy had entered the forest after the other villains. With the carriage completely destroyed, there was no way to escape. But the old man threatened, saying there would be no escape for the hero. He then conjured another powerful spell. To protect himself, Lee Kuel tried to form a dark matter barrier. The defense absorbed the enemy's magic into the void, leaving him surprised by the boy's talent. Kuel then thanked for the teachings he received about light and darkness, until a stone whizzed through the air, and the dark mage, with little effort, blocked it. Kuel, noticing that the mage was stronger than Marcus, judged him to be the leader, but the man was still just a level 7 subordinate, for the true leader was even more powerful and terrifying. the enemy ordered one of his henchmen to take care of Makan and Lucy. Promising not to disappoint his master, the subordinate set off at high speed. Kyul then became enraged and launched a thunder shock against the enemy. But the attack caused no damage to the adversary. The hero did not give up and cast another electricity spell. Meanwhile, the dark mage calmly awaited him. However, Kyul only wanted to distract the old man, so his friends could escape. Realizing the situation, the enemy gathered all the electrical charge at the tip of his staff, launching the spell with double power against the heroes. This left the protagonist astonished by such power. The man was furious for having lost the magical stone mine. He made an offer for Kyul to surrender, promising to let his friends go free, but Kyul was sure the heroes would never accept that, except for Palm, of course. The evil mage then uttered a word of power to stun our protagonist, who became disoriented. The more he tried to move, the worse it got. Then he gritted his teeth and remembered that, compared to the training with sapphires, this was nothing. He dispelled the magic, leaving the mage speechless. Then he spat to the side and prepared his favorite attack. He fired his fireball. Even with the enemy blocking, he decided he should attack as much as he could. So he launched fire and ice with all his might. Yet the old mage emerged unscathed from the dust, certain that Kyul would never escape alive from that forest. But our protagonist would not give up so easily. He then conjured another spell. However, he was caught off guard by an attack from behind. He remembered the other mage, now having to divide his attention between two opponents, until he heard someone calling for help in the forest. Kyul hoped his friends were okay. The old man asked who the protagonist worked for, and already summoned another magic circle for a powerful attack. But Lucy appeared with one of the enemies as a hostage. However, the bald mage did not seem to care about the disciple, leaving Lucy somewhat indignant. Suddenly, the weaker mage prepared a fireball against the elf, but Makan appeared in his tiger form and delivered a brutal attack on the individual. Despite the animal's fury, he managed to restrain it, and when he was about to deliver the coup de grace to the tiger, Kyul tried to stop him, but the bald mage had the advantage. The protagonist could only defend himself and watch. His friend tried to rise against the mage. However, the heroes needed to improvise. Palm struck the other enemy with a whip to disorient him, stealing his staff, as that was what she did best. The mage was completely vulnerable without his staff. When the sorcerer noticed the tiger behind him, he realized the animal's intentions were lethal. It took only one blow to bring down the hooded man. Meanwhile, Lucy, realizing it made no difference to keep him alive, eliminated the other aspirant. But the older mage was not impacted, and decided to finish off our hero once and for all. Lucy still tried to throw a stone at the old mage's head, but the enemy was determined and conjured his cosmic dust magic. Kyul watched the ice crystals spreading, and tried to stop them, but the power was so great, and his mana was almost depleted. Suddenly Lucy used the magic of her sword and joined forces with Kyul, which left the dark mage even more fascinated. However, the two heroes were no match for the mage's power, and began to feel their bodies freezing. Kyul suggested the elf flee with the group, but Lucy did not intend to abandon him. Our hero had already exhausted all his strength. Even with Lucy's screams, he could not resist. When the protagonist thought it was the end, the dragon heart began to shine. The dark mage felt the light blinding his vision, but attacked again. Lucy blocked the attack as much as she could, while Riard's seed began to respond within the protagonist. Then, the power of the artifact started to expand in his body, causing him immense pain. Kyul remembered his master's teachings about his true purpose. Thus he began to master that power, as he needed to become strong and return to his world. Everyone watched the magic grow before the young man, until the young man found himself as a spiritual projection in the middle of a tropical forest, and sitting on a rock, there was a mysterious man resting. For that forest, where everything was balanced, was his home. The young man had no idea who that man was. Then he introduced himself as Acreon, the legend in person, the dragon that split the stones. Kyul then asked if he had died, but the great dragon explained that it was just a manifestation of his existence within the dragon heart that the boy carried. Then after a few moments of deep reflection with the entity, Kyul saw the man send him back to where he belonged. He then felt his body plummet back into the light. Meanwhile, Lucy was trying to resist the intense cold, and Kyul remained motionless, petrified. The elf shouted, trying to wake her friend, who was her only hope, until he awoke and began to levitate, leaving the old wizard completely incredulous. Then Kyul, now awakened with the mana of the dragon heart, faced the enemy, and he began to laugh uncontrollably. The wizard thought the young man had lost his mind, but Kyul just told Lucy that from then on, he would take over the fight. The dark wizard wanted to know how the boy would fight without mana, so Kyul decided to show his new tricks. There was so much fire that the enemy wizard was certainly terrified. While the heroes watched all that display of power, Kyul revealed that he had regained his mana and leveled up. Even his staff became more robust. Then he launched a torrent of fire that practically engulfed the old man, leaving him completely charred. The friends approached the wizard, and Elysian confessed that he was afraid they would be defeated. Then Palm, wasting no time, went to claim the danger bonus, but the priestess didn't like it, and went to defend our protagonist, and she was embarrassed when the thief asked if she was married to Leke, after all. But Kuehl soon reprimanded the girl's attitude. Lucy wanted to know what had happened during the confusion, and the MC told the elf that he had absorbed the dragon heart. Then the group congratulated him for reaching level 6, but the thief scoffed, as she didn't think the boy was that smart. With the wizards captured and the carriage destroyed, the group decided to go look for the horses while LK and Lucy rested a bit. And when everything seemed calm, Lucy noticed that the bald wizard's staff was still emitting power, so Kuehl went to get the object. But suddenly, flames appeared to attack him. Kuehl quickly blocked them, and completely by surprise, another wizard appeared, indignant to see his companion charred. Then he decided he would take revenge. The three stared at each other for a while, and Lucy seemed to recognize him. But when Kuehl asked the girl to step back, the wizard for some reason wanted the elf for himself. However, both the tiger and the cat arrived by surprise to attack the elder, but they were easily repelled. Then the man wanted to know how many lives LK had sacrificed to become such a powerful dark wizard. But Kuehl, not understanding anything, replied that the dark wizard there was the old man, and Lucy commented that his energy was different. Then LK noticed that, indeed, the wizard's mana did not exude dark magic, and decided to say that the old man was losing his mind. But the wizard did not want to listen to our hero, because the staff that LK was holding emanated dark magic. So he dropped the staff and said, "Look, it's not what you think," and showed his own staff, through which he had conjured his spells. The old man dismounted from the horse, still not believing the MC, and deduced that the boy was too young to have such power. But LK boasted, claiming he was a prodigy boy, and suddenly he stated that he was 70 years old. Logically, the wizard did not believe it, but it seemed that LK was not willing to talk about the dragon heart. Then, already out of patience, the old wizard took off his hood and said he was 67 years old. Lucy decided to end the confusion and struck the MC on the head, and in the midst of that stalemate, Elysian appeared, claiming that our hero was not a dark mage. But just when it seemed the old man would relent, he accused the MC of brainwashing the priestess. Then, it was necessary for Leo, the knight, to appear to confirm LK's identity. Kyle and Lucy were surprised by the guardian's presence. Yet the old mage wanted to start a discussion about the way the hero spoke to the prince, leaving Kuehl speechless with the revelation about young Leo's royal lineage. Then, a delegation appeared with Leo, finding it outrageous the way the MC addressed the prince. But Leo asked his captain Tomford to remain calm, and asked Kyle what had happened. The prince was surprised to learn that the group had emerged unscathed from the fairy forest. Finally, the old mage accepted that LK was not a dark mage. Then, Leo introduced Marquis Carrillo von Christopher from the kingdom of Kudrin. The two mages were introduced, and the old man wanted to know where the dark mage was. Kyle showed the man completely charred on the ground, and Christopher was incredulous that our hero had defeated a level 7 mage in such a way. Kuehl asked how the prince had found him. Then, Leo revealed he had followed him after paying some mercenaries for information. The prince apologized and introduced himself as Leonhard von Kudrin, the second of his name, and while Elysian healed Makan and Palm, Leke accused Christopher of almost killing his friends. Then, the old man commented that the boy was very resentful. Makan woke up somewhat dazed and was surprised to learn that Leo was the prince of Kudrin. As for Palm, when he saw the bearded mage in front of him, he quickly fled without asking for extra money. However, when everything was clarified, he explained that he hadn't fled, it was just a withdrawal strategy. With everything resolved, they mounted their horses to leave, but Kyle was left without a mount to call his own. Then, the gentleman offered him a place on his saddle, and as they trotted, he decided to conduct a thorough interrogation with the boy. They left the prisoner mages under the prince's guard and said their goodbyes. Lickay felt relieved to have returned safely, and Sherman received them excited and curious about the fairy kingdom. The girls devoured everything in sight, and Kuehl, observing them, realized that if it weren't for the elf, he would be dead. Besides feeling the sorrow that if it weren't for him, the girl could be in comfort beside her mother. But Lucy didn't care, eating and sleeping at the same time. So Lickay decided to take her to the room. While watching her sleep, he noticed that the pendant where the dragon heart was no longer glowed. Suddenly he felt his headache excessively, and collapsed unconscious next to Lucy, who was snoring heavily. The MC heard his name, and when he opened his eyes, Lucy was complaining about him sleeping there. But even Kuehl was startled by the sudden fainting. There was a boy in noble attire, who despite being weak, was very sensitive. At the same time Leonhart reached the age to be crowned prince, the nobles discussed the throne succession between Joan and Leonhart. And even in that situation, the king did not take sides, as he wanted to keep an eye on Joan until he grew up. After failing with public opinion, Leonhart abdicated the throne and insisted that the king grant the crown to young Joan. But the nobles remained watchful, while Leo led a life distant from political intrigues. Macken then explained that this is why Prince Leonhart became known as a layabout, but Else didn't like the nickname, and Leo, who was right behind, agreed. The prince recounted that they had interrogated the prisoners, and the mage Christopher explained that the mercenaries only knew they were working for a dark mage. Else didn't believe the story, and suggested extracting information from the bald man's disciples. Then, Leo said the men were dead. Kuehl was outraged that no one was watching them. However, Leo explained that even the guards had been eliminated. The prince wanted to understand how the dark mages had discovered the magical stone mine, and Christopher revealed that one of the mages had escaped. Besides, rumors pointed to the existence of a sinister organization called Darkgate, which even made Elysian shudder upon hearing the name. However, even if they were just rumors, Leo would continue to investigate if there was a high number of people sacrificed. Makan suggested increasing the army to combat the enemies. Ekul remembered that the bald man had mentioned working for someone. Then, old Christopher became enraged, stating he would never agree to die for dark wizards who, without the help of demons, could barely draw a magic circle, until the wizard suddenly asked if Li Yun wanted to be his disciple. This brought a smile to Elysian, as the bearded man was a court wizard. However, Kuhl was pensive, even with the rogue's support. She suddenly saw some men enter the tavern looking for her. She revealed they belonged to Stefan's mercantile group, for whom she worked. Then, the prince's guards promptly closed in on the henchmen, but Kuhl asked Leonhardt to let them handle the situation. And so, the prince and his men left the tavern. Then, the merchant explained he would need to take Palm to the boss. However, Li Yunqing commented that the rogue was still in his service, but the mustached man found the MC very arrogant and lunged at him, until Lucy appeared, landing a spinning kick on the man's face. Soon the group took care of the merchants, and Kuhl commented that if they wanted to take Palm, they would have to go through them. Then, the only one left to tell the tale fled in terror. Kuhl even taunted the man, telling him to run back to his mother. But Sherman advised the heroes not to mess with the merchants, as they were connected to the Heinz family. However, Palm Civet was so furious that she promised to beat them all up, and Kuhl liked the idea. So that became the quintet's new objective. The tavern door burst open with the band of merchants returning to settle the score, and Sherman simply asked the MC not to break his establishment. One of the men ordered the rogue to accompany them, and in response his face was drenched with water. Kuhl, eager for a commotion, threw the water at the henchmen. Then the bald man, who was not the wizard, ordered everyone to attack. On one side they saw Makan just waiting to turn them into cat food. On the other, there was the frail group of prodigious teenagers. The merchants then decided to go after the youths. But the priestess, who was also skilled in hand-to-hand combat, immediately showed how to hit the enemy's lower parts. Lucy, who already enjoyed the battle, quickly put two to sleep. Palm, with her whip, dominated several more, and when Makan lifted one of them with great strength, even Sherman joined the fight to prevent his mugs from being broken. Kuhl was impressed with Katina's calmness while her companion fought intensely, and when the bald man tried to grab our protagonist from behind, he received such a strong shock that he writhed on the ground. Then, the beating was enough to make the merchants retreat, and incredibly, the situation in the tavern didn't stop there. Sherman complained to the people, saying that wasn't how one entered someone else's establishment. Other better-equipped men arrived to find out who had messed with Stefan, and Stefan himself came right behind, with a criminal leader's demeanor, telling Palm that if she returned to him, she could leave that mess behind. Kuhl stepped forward and told the man to leave the girl alone, but Stefan explained that the thief owed him a lot of money, and the girl gritted her teeth when the man mentioned 3,000, as most of that amount was just interest. Kuhl wanted to know if the leader was only after her because of the fairy forest, and smiling, Stefan confirmed. Then, the boy accused the man of what happened to Camille. The man was furious, but Lee Kuhl said they learned everything from the fairy queen. However, Stefan decided to propose a deal, and asked the group to gather Calvino leaves in the forest. The protagonist was unsure what it was about, but McCann explained it was an herb used to anesthetize people. The leader also asked for the fairy queen, alive or dead, as only then would Palm be free of her debts. Lucy and Kuhl immediately refused the man's rude request. Stefan then ordered his henchmen to attack, and this time, the wizard took action and trapped the opponents with his magic. Kuhl ordered not to let Stefan escape, and Palm, with her whip, launched herself over the henchman towards the leader, delivering a strong blow directly to his face, and then immobilized him, until someone burst the tavern door open again, to Sherman's despair. But this time, it was the Royal Guard soldiers. Lieutenant Guilford ordered them to stop the commotion, but Palm, if she could, would have eliminated Stefan right there. Kuhl suggested that the girl obey the guard, so she calmed down and handed the criminal over to Guilford, who asked what was happening. Stefan stepped forward and said he had been attacked unjustly, and even with Kuhl and Palm saying it wasn't true, the lieutenant ordered the arrest of everyone except the criminal leader. Then, Leonhardt arrived and accused the officer of listening to only one side of the story, and ordered him to arrest Stefan and his henchmen for the disturbance at the inn. After all, the prince was just observing and listening to everything, but the lieutenant, who didn't know Leonhardt, was not willing to yield, and ordered his men to arrest him too. Then the prince's captain opposed and asked if the officer knew who he was talking to, but Guilford insisted he had the authority to arrest anyone. Then Leo questioned if such a law applied to royalty, but Stefan scoffed at the idea that the prince himself was among the commoners, until one of the soldiers suggested Guilford take a look outside the tavern and noticed the entourage with Leonhardt's emblem. Then the sheriff of La Rochelle approached desperately and asked if the lieutenant had lost his mind. Guilford was perplexed to discover he almost ordered the arrest of the prince and knelt before the hero. offering his life as punishment. Leo then exposed that the lieutenant acted like someone who was bribed by Stefan, and ordered the sheriff to investigate if the criminal was involved with the illegal herb market. The bandit was furious with the situation, and Palm took the opportunity to land a few more blows on the guy. Stefan was taken into custody, and Palm Civet felt relieved after so much suffering at the hands of the bandit. In the end, she was grateful for the help from Kuehl and Leo in solving her problem. The wizard Christopher didn't miss the chance to try recruiting Leo again. But Kuehl, this time, gathered courage and rejected the offer to become his disciple, explaining that he was on a mission for his master, which left the old wizard saddened. Leo wanted to know where the heroes were heading, and Elysian replied they were on their way to the kingdom of Goose. Leo then asked the protagonist to be careful, as the dark wizards were still at large, and LK commented that there might be more mines of magic stones, leaving the prince worried about the other kingdoms. Kuehl then questioned if the dark wizards were really going to summon demons, but the group quickly reprimanded him, asking not to attract bad luck with that thought, and Kuehl realized that talking about demons there was almost a bad omen. Palm said goodbye to the group as the services were over, but Kuehl felt a tinge of longing for the thief, and as she walked away he shouted that he would leave the next day. Palm felt tears fall and ran so as not to draw attention. The next day the carriage had been repaired, and Elysian was hopeful about the journey. Makan said goodbye to the innkeeper, who received a reward from the prince for the commotion, while Kuehl took one last look at the city, hoping the thief would do well in life. And suddenly, the girl was on top of the carriage, ready to leave, making excuses that it was better to leave because she was being prosecuted. But Lucy didn't fall for the thief's story, which made her furious, and Kuehl laughed as the group was reunited again. Then, they headed to the Kingdom of Goose. Lucy was excited to visit the Kingdom of Goose, which was one of the 7 greatest constructions of Arsenia. On the other hand, Palm seemed bored, and Kuehl commented that Stefan was already being investigated. Lucy asked if the thief knew the city, but Palm replied she never needed to go there, as she served the goddess of luck Marinka, and Elysian found it curious, as only thieves served that goddess. While Makan guided the horses, listening to the commotion, Kuehl then tried to calm things down, and wanted to know what was so important about the Kingdom of Goose. The priestess was eager to tell the story of the place, and she began by saying that it used to be a village called Atland, where Elena lived, who climbed the mountain to pray, until a crowned goose appeared, and said she should spread its will across the land. Palm thought it was a made-up story, but Elysian assured that Elena showed the cure for diseases to humanity. Kuehl wanted to know if the priestess was a native of the Kingdom of Goose, and the girl confirmed she was an orphan, and had been raised by the nuns. The MC made up a story that he too had been found by Rayard, just to get into the spirit, but it reminded him of his parents, and he wished to return home as soon as possible. They arrived at the imposing kingdom, which left both Lucy and LK speechless at the size of the place. Then, 2 guards politely prevented the group from entering the kingdom, but Elysian introduced herself and said that Father Hamill was expecting her, which promptly changed the men's minds. Kuehl realized that the priestess was renowned there. They were then taken to a vegetarian banquet, which did not please the carnivores of the group. Father Hamill appeared, greeting the guests, but the MC deduced that the man was excessively muscular. Meccan asked if the priest had read the letter he sent, and the man confirmed, expressing sorrow for Kale's death, and wanted to know about the donation. Elysian was curious, and the priest commented that a large sum had been donated in the girl's name, and thus they were assuming she was the lost daughter of the royal family. Kuehl understood that Leo's help made the guards change their stance upon hearing the priestess's name. The girl told the priest that they had faced the dark wizards but were in the kingdom for another reason. She revealed that she had received a message from the oracle, leaving the priest so surprised that he wanted to bring the pope to the priestess's presence immediately. Elysian tried to say she wasn't ready for the occasion, but the muscular priest of Arsenia wouldn't hear of it. The girl was desperate, but Kuehl tried to comfort her. Then an old man in pajamas came running, and Kuehl indicated where the bathroom was. But Elysian recognized Pope Hu Hang Nim and awkwardly introduced herself to the man. Already dressed appropriately, the old man commented that he was expecting the message. Elysian then uttered the words of the prophecy, which spoke of the living, the dead, and a portal that would open, and that those not from that world would disappear. The priest and the pope knelt before the priestess. While Kuehl didn't understand anything the girl said, the religious figures were certain of the meaning of those words, or almost certain, which left the MC even more confused. However, what mattered to the pope was the situation Elysian was in when she received such a message. The young woman recounted that she was praying when a figure of light appeared, and she walked towards it. However, she fainted, and upon waking, she was in her bed. Elysian also revealed that her divine power had increased considerably. The priest deduced that she had become a high priestess, but Kyle, already overwhelmed with so much information, demanded they speak literally about what was in the message. After all, then the pope wanted to know who the cheeky boy was, but asked if everyone had memorized the message. The girls felt their intelligence insulted, but Kyle asked for a repeat. The pope then explained that the message related to recent events, and Kyle asked if there was any connection with the dark wizards. But the religious figure understood that the dark wizards only wanted to bring disorder and chaos. Then, he remembered the message Lucy's mother received a long time ago. However, The people were so happy with the victory that she didn't share it with everyone, and so the religious figure presumed it was time to prepare to confront the new darkness. Kyle commented that he ended up crossing paths with the Black Gate. The priestess decided to explain to the Pope how it all happened. The priests were concerned about the possibility of the dark wizards already being embedded among the royal families. Although it was difficult, as getting involved with dark wizards meant losing honor, but Kyle knew there was something hidden in this story. Then the Pope revealed that the situation was compromised in the kingdom of Eluin, thus extending to the kingdom of Kudrin. This left Makan worried about Prince Leo. The Pope began to decipher the message, and Kyle also tried to understand how the words connected to the dark wizards, until the last verse brought a strange feeling to the protagonist. Someone who exists in this world but is not from this world. Kyle was sweating cold with so many assumptions made by the group about who this being from another world could be. Both Elysian and Palm were willing to eliminate the powerful foreign enemy. Poor guy, he just wanted to escape school. But before heads rolled, Kyle was even more certain that he needed to return home soon. So to ease the situation, the protagonist mentioned that this individual might just be lost. The priestess became even more furious, and blamed those who summoned the unwanted. But when Lucy tried to defend her father, our hero promptly silenced the troublesome elf. The Pope then stepped forward and said that the church would be willing to help combat this new evil. This renewed Elysian's hopes. She now had to decide between staying in the church or traveling with her friends. So she chose to accompany our hero to Eluin. This made both Makan and the priests proud of the young woman. Then the Pope approached Elysian and revealed that she might become the next saint, as it was Emily who gave birth to her. He then handed the girl 2 sacred bracelets worn by the supreme elf. Elysian was very embarrassed, but the Pope reminded her that she should return them once the fight was over. Thus, the young woman put on the jewelry while receiving the pontiff's blessing. After the ceremony, the priestess accompanied the religious to pray, and Makan noticed how happy his friend was. Unlike Kuel, who even without wanting to get involved, would have to face the dark wizards, because the prophecy also spoke about him. So more than ever, he wished to gather the 4 stones and leave. "Oh God, it's me again," he said. It was the day to leave. But Kuel felt that Elysian wanted to stay in the kingdom, although she knew she would return soon. Palm was somewhat suspicious about being in the right direction, but Kuel confirmed that he had consulted the magical tracker. The rogue asked what LK would do if someone already had the dragon heart, and when the protagonist mentioned the idea of stealing it, she made sure to say that it wasn't right coming from her. Then Lucy, with her style of letting things happen, calmed Archmage's anxiety. He stroked the girl's hair and found it extremely soft. The carriage crossed the border, and they reached the capital of Eluin, and Kal was apprehensive as he looked at the map, wondering if the family from 150 years ago was still there. However, there were still quite a few kilometers to go. According to Makan, LK took the Delphin family ring, wondering about Riyard's expectations regarding his journey. On the way, LK wanted to perform a magical experiment, and asked the girls for help to stop him if it didn't work. And they loved the idea of torturing our prodigy boy. Meanwhile, Makan, acting as the coachman, was getting used to the chaos inside the cabin, because Lelke had just been tied up with Palm's whip, and could barely breathe. And in this context, the only one showing sanity was Elysian. Then, the lack of oxygen began to leave Lelke disoriented, talking about power and reaching the supreme level, to the point where even Palm began to regret tying the boy so tightly. Lee Kuel conjured the mana injection, and suddenly, the pendant and the mana circles on his body connected, making the protagonist have a near-death experience to meet the creator again, or rather, Acreon. He decided to explain to the boy about level 6, first informing that with mana injection in a living mage, the maximum reached is level 5. Then, he sent an injection to the boy's head that made him tremble uncontrollably. Meanwhile, on the other side, the girls noted that it had been a good idea to tie up the clever boy. Acreon congratulated the boy for enduring the pain of the level 6 charge. Well, Kuel asked if he would see the god again, and Acreon said it would depend on the dragon hearts he found. Then, he was brought back to reality, and Lucy assessed that it was faster than the last time. Kuel looked at the pendant and noticed that the object's function had ended. On the way, Makan asked to observe the surrounding villages more closely. Kuel agreed and decided to take a nap. But while he slept, he heard a commotion outside the carriage. Then Lucy said they had blocked the road while Makan tried to bargain for passage, until a guard told the superior that they were stopping suspicious people. Then, the man with a severe expression analyzed the travelers, and Kuel tried to use his charisma, but the attempt failed drastically, and the officer ordered the boy's arrest. Then, the guard showed something that left the chief perplexed. It was Lucy, the red-haired elf. Suddenly, one of the guards on the wall announced the approach of the army of a certain Duke Spellis, and the officer was not pleased with the visit, because the man arrived with an intimidating cavalry that made him tremble. Then, the Duke was announced as Albert von Spellis. He greeted the officer, Lord Jeppes, with grandeur, but Jeppes dryly asked what the knight was doing in those lands. The man demanded the officer surrender, promising to maintain his title if he swore loyalty to Albert von Spellis. But Jeppes, firmly, replied that he already served the Marquis of Delphin. The girl merely watched the situation intensify, until Jeppes drew his sword and challenged the knight to a duel. Albert von Spellis felt comfortable, as he had expected the challenge. He threatened again that if Jeppes did not surrender, he would end them all once and for all. However, suddenly, Gull approached the Duke and peacefully asked them to stop. But when von Spellis saw Lucy, he belittled her in front of everyone. He ordered his men to capture her. Gull then invoked his magic circles and cast fire against the soldiers. The knight beside Albert suggested that the man come to an agreement with the mage. However, the Duke did not believe that the blaze was real, until he saw his men burning and panicked. The archers shot arrows at the flames, but they were no match for the young man's magic. Albert deduced that Jeppes had planned all of this, and demanded the officer's head from the knight Elmar, who quickly crossed the wall of flames. Gull launched an electric attack to paralyze the opponent. The young man, confident, called the Duke for a one-on-one combat. However, the army leader did not accept, and ordered his men to attack with full force. The protagonist retaliated, casting magic intensely, until the Duke himself fell from his horse. Gull asked if watching the battle from afar was satisfactory for Jeppes. Then the officer realized the situation and ordered his men to attack as well. Duke Albert retreated, but Lucy, who does not like being insulted, made a swift move and hurled a boulder at the man, hitting the target squarely. Jeppes asked his men to organize the troops after the victory. The Lord thanked Gull, who asked who the Duke was. Jeppes explained that he was the second son of the Spellis family, and was at war with the Marquis of Delphin. He then wanted to know what the protagonist's relationship with the Marquis was. Gull was left unsure of what to answer. They were then taken to the castle, which bore the emblem of the Red Dragon, where they awaited the officer to speak with his lord. Gull observed the place while Lucy enjoyed the smell coming from the kitchen, until the lord approached, leaving the entire group impressed, for Reyna von Delphin was a red-haired girl who seemed like an older version of Lucy, but without the elf ears. Kuhl noticed the resemblance, and understood that Albert did not want to take the elf without a purpose. The two stared at each other. Kuhl asked how Reyna became a lord without being Delphin's daughter. But before any explanation, the lord asked the protagonist to introduce himself as well, demanding a bit of manners. After the explanation by the fireplace, Reyna thanked Kuhl for the help against Albert von Spellis. She wanted to know what connection the elf Lucy had with the Marquis of Delphin, due to her physical characteristics. However, when the elf was about to mention Reynard, Kuhl covered her mouth, thinking it best to omit that information. Kuhl still tried to whisper in Lucy's ear, but she did not understand the message. He then turned to the Lord and asked if she had any idea who had sent them there. Rainey then revealed that the king had abdicated the throne and went to the mountains to seek the Red Dragon. Kuhl explained that Lucy was a direct descendant of Rain von Delphin, and that he was a disciple of the elf's father. He then showed Reynard's ring to Lord Rainey. He explained that Lucy's father had asked him to deliver it to the Marquis of Delphin. Suddenly, the redhead threw the ring into the fire. Kuhl, desperate, grabbed the poker and retrieved the object from the embers. Rainey took the ring, which was not hot, and explained that the family artifact was made of dragon bones, being practically unbreakable. According to Rainey, the first monarch had made 2 rings, one for himself and the other for his son, thus throwing it into the fire confirmed its authenticity. The Lord deduced that she and Lucy were distant relatives. Kuhl was astonished to learn that Lucy, with her youthful appearance, was older than the redhead of the castle. Rainey then explained that Lucy was 10 years older than her. This made Locke curious to know if the half-elf could be older than him as well. The protagonist got straight to the point and said he was looking for the Blackstream sword. Rainey was suspicious, and the protagonist explained that his master had asked him to find it, as it would provide answers. However, the Lord revealed that the sword had been given to the Duke of Spellis, which left the mage outraged. The girl explained that the king, still very young, appointed the Duke, who upon gaining a high position, changed the advisors. This affected even Rainey's father and uncle, who were executed in their carriage, despite being escorted by 4 knights. Machen found the story suspicious, and the girl agreed, as the mages of Delphin found traces of magic at the scene. Thus she supposed that the mages of the Elua Tower might know the answer. Moreover, the head of the Order of Mages was a von Spellis, and therefore cancelled the investigation. The Lord mentioned that she even received a marriage proposal from the Duke himself. Machen understood the Duke's strategy but said, hopefully, that the Lord could win this battle. Kuhl wanted to know if it was Albert von Spellis, but Rainey said it was another Duke, nearly 60 years old, which outraged the protagonist and the rogue with such insolence. However, the Lord's greatest outrage was that the man might be involved in her father's death. So, by rejecting the marriage, a war began, in which the sword ended up in the enemy's possession. Rainey revealed that she was inclined to marry to protect her people, but Lucy promptly opposed and said she would never let the younger relative make such a sacrifice. The two embraced, and the half-elf promised she would help her. And logically, the hero confirmed that he would assist them in this great challenge. The heroes considered hiring mercenaries to help the kingdom, but Lucy suggested they attack directly, as they had done before. However, dealing with a duke would be a much more complex situation. The half-elf was upset with LK, thinking he was unwilling. She was frustrated because for the first time she felt like an older sister. Then she immobilized Kuhl, and the young man quickly changed his mind due to the girl's insistence. Kuehl suggested they kidnap the Duke. Palm found the strategy somewhat risky, so they decided to sleep on it and think of something better the next day. However, in the middle of the night, a noise woke the protagonist. Makan got up quickly. The girls also woke up startled. Reina appeared, informing them that the Duke was at the castle. Lucy reassured the Lord, who was moved by the protective attitude. Luque organized the group, leaving Elysian to care for the wounded, while the others headed to the wall. Palm initially hesitated to avoid conflict. However, even reluctantly she agreed. Duke Alan, who was Albert's brother, announced himself at the castle gate with his men. Jepes, from inside the walls, responded that the Lord would only receive them in the morning. Duke Alan then said he would only leave if they let him see Duke Albert, until LK appeared furious and ordered the group to return. The Duke clenched his teeth upon seeing LK, who was pleased to know his reputation remained intact. Alan ordered them to hand over his brother. Kuril agreed, on the condition that Alan enter the castle alone, but the Duke, feeling insulted by the mage, ordered his men to attack. The archers quickly fired. Kuril protected everyone with his magical shield. The Duke's soldiers were impressed by the young man's power. Then Jepes ordered a counterattack with the same intensity, hitting the soldiers trying to breach the walls. Kuril realized he was in a real war and couldn't defend everyone, so he decided to launch a large-scale fireball. Suddenly, an older man with a mustache summoned ice spears, surprising the hero with the presence of a mage on the enemy side. But he even enjoyed being able to fight on equal terms, and when the Delphin soldiers hesitated, Lucy arrived with her blazing blade to attack and rally the group. Makan and Palm also joined the battle. Meanwhile, the mage hired by the Duke revealed his assistants, who launched another attack, which was blocked by the protagonist. But it was just a distraction, as the real blow from the mustached mage was against the castle gate. And when Kuehl realized it, a huge mud hammer had already been conjured. Kuehl leaped and noticed the soldiers wielding magical shields. The mud hammer struck the gate, leaving Jepes and his men worried. Palm asked if there was a secret passage for them to escape. Kuehl thought the idea of a passage was brilliant, but with the intention of launching a surprise attack, Makan thought it would be risky. But for LK, once they captured the Duke, the battle would end. Palm then decided to stay at the top of the castle to avoid unnecessary risks. Jepes ordered a group to go to the secret passage, while the hammer pounded frantically against the gate. Kuehl noticed there were several magicians, and since the soldiers had those magical shields, he created a huge source of light that blinded the enemies. When Duke Alan ordered them to protect the magicians, they were already writhing under Kuehl's electricity magic. With the magicians down, Jepes ordered the attack, but suddenly, Duke Alan conjured a circle of fire, revealing himself as a magician to the protagonist. The mustached magician continued his plan with the mud hammer. Then Kuehl tried to target him, but the magicians beside him blocked the attack. Our hero decided to freeze the hammer with his magic, and then threw a fireball that disintegrated the weapon. Duke Alan was astonished, while the mustached magician was determined to eliminate the boy. He asked the Duke to focus on the gate, as he would take care of the hero. The magician made his way through his disciples and launched a powerful spell. Kuehl did the same. The two cast the same arcane magic, and were measuring forces, while Jepes ordered everyone to move away from there. The older magician was perplexed to realize that Kuehl was absorbing his mana, and the Duke understood that the boy had exceptional abilities, so exceptional that he called himself the Great Master LK. In a moment of pure emotion, LK was at the same level as the magician, and therefore decided to face him on equal terms. The guards moved away with the combat, and even with the Duke calling the magician, Byron was only focused on the protagonist. Then, Alan and the other magicians attacked LK from behind, but Jepes quickly ordered his men to create a shield barrier to protect the hero, until the boy activated his dragon heart, leaving the old magician indignant with the magnitude of his power, which practically consumed him. The Duke did not move a muscle, while Kuehl, even exhausted, prepared the next wave of attack, which exploded over the enemies' heads. The boy was already trembling due to the high mana expenditure. Therefore, the Duke ordered his men to keep advancing. But suddenly, Makan and his allies emerged to confront them, knocking down the soldiers who mistook Lucy for Lady Reina. But the elf made sure to make it clear that she was the older sister. The Duke's knight, foreseeing defeat, suggested they retreat, and so Duke Alan did, but LK was not willing to let them escape. Then Lucy jumped over Makan, who threw the elf with all his strength. The girl flew towards Alan, who couldn't believe what he was seeing. Lucy conjured her flaming blade, shouting her father's name, and after spreading the flames, delivered a strong kick to the cowardly Duke, who fell heavily to the ground. Lucy pointed the sword at the man, forcing his surrender. However, she saw something in the Duke that distracted her for a few seconds. Alan, however, surrendered without noticing the girl's expression. Delphin exploded in celebration, while Reina thanked tearfully from her tower, to the satisfaction of the hero, who was completely exhausted and injured. The lady ran to hug her sister, but Kael, with a dirty face, thought he deserved a gesture of affection too. So Makan gave the boy a strong hug, until the imprisoned Duke uttered the classic threat, asking if they knew who he was. However, Lucy and LK just looked at the noble without the slightest interest. The Duke threatened, saying his father would not let that affront go unpunished. Kale commented that the Duke was rude because he didn't let people sleep, but Lucy wanted to end the commotion quickly. So, even tired and without any mana, LK agreed with the elf. However, Palm, indignant, said you have to stop causing so much trouble. But Kale justified that if the Lord of Spellis knew about the defeat, he would send more troops, so that was the best time to attack. LK decided to demand help from the young Duke, who immediately refused. Then Kale ordered them to force him to cooperate, and the man was paralyzed with fear, but the MC only wanted the clothes of the men from Spellis to execute his plan. Delphin's troop arrived at the Spellis castle, and Kale used magic to transform into Duke Alan. The MC ordered the gate to be opened and lied that they had won the battle, showing Reyna as a prisoner. With the gates open, Kale and the group were greeted by a counselor, but in a hurry, he asked where his father was. The man said the Lord was busy in the office. Then LK mentioned that a dark mage had appeared in Delphin, alarming the members of Spellis. Palm praised the mage's performance, but inside, he was extremely nervous, until the Lord arrived wanting to know the news, and Duke Kale suggested that the Lord listen to the false prisoner. But suddenly the Lord realized that Kale was not his son Alan. Then the mage revealed himself. As the guards moved towards them, Lucy showed her claws and launched an attack. And when the Lord noticed that Reyna was also an imposter, it was too late, for Lucy skillfully immobilized him, and along with LK, they taunted the captured Lord. The Lord still tried to threaten the boy, but LK asked the man to cooperate for the sake of his children, and noticing the Lord's intransigence, said he would count to 3 before Lucy slit his throat. Then, at 3, Lord Spellis ordered his men to lower their weapons. Numerous swords were thrown to the ground, and Lucy struck the Lord to render him unconscious. The Lord fell unconscious into Makan's arms, who promised to take him back safely, but Kale made it clear to the counselor that if he tried anything, the Lord would be eliminated. The troop left the castle with the captive Lord, and Palm commented to Makan that she had been very nervous. The people of Delphin welcomed the heroes with applause for the success of the plan, and Reyna seemed unable to believe that the war had come to an end. Leke had another bleeding, and Lucy was worried, but the MC said he just needed to rest. The next day, Leke was still very weak, but he couldn't give up on the Black Stream. Kale and Lucy went to see the prisoner Lord, who received them very irritated, but Kale got straight to the point and asked about the sword. Then the man replied that the weapon was in the Tower of Eloa, with his uncle Adrian. Disillusioned, the MC decided to leave after the answer, and the Lord, enraged, wanted to know if all that conflict was because of the sword, but he got no response. Kale felt fatigued with that cat and mouse game, until Reyna announced the arrival of an ambassador sent by the king to end the war. However, the ambassador was none other than priest Adrian von Spellis. The man arrived at the place full of smiles for LK, who decided to play along just to see what the priest's intentions were. Then, maliciously, the priest commented he was surprised the boy had defeated Byron. Kale confirmed but tried not to be manipulated, even needing clues about the sword, until Lucy approached the priest, and the two stared at each other suspiciously. And Reyna explained to the priest that she was already negotiating with the Lord, so there was no need for external interference. Upon hearing the news, the priest decided to leave, as he was more curious to meet Lelke than to resolve the war, leaving Reyna and the others perplexed. However, the MC couldn't stand seeing the man leaving, and asked if the Black Stream was in the magic tower. The man became interested in the boy's desire, who justified it as a relic of the Delphin house, and therefore needed to be returned. Then, the priest replied that he could only return it with the king's approval, and so he told the MC he could help him with 2 conditions: that he release the Duke in 3 days, and that, with Byron's death, he take his place to continue the research in the magic tower. Kuehl felt the deal was risky, but to obtain the Black Stream, he accepted the offer, eliciting a mysterious smile from the old priest, who wished for a good relationship between the tower and the kingdom of Delphin. Reyna was worried about the boy's departure, but Kuehl replied that he wouldn't fall into any trap, especially with Lucy by his side. The priest hurried the pair. Then the two entered the man's carriage, and Reyna watched them leave with a heavy heart. Kuehl glimpsed the great tower which had been founded at the beginning of time, but his focus was the sword, so he decided to check the DTS to see if the priest was telling the truth, and to his luck, the artifact was indeed in the tower. They followed Adrian through the tower's hall, which exuded magic, until one of the disciples approached the master, concerned about his absence. But Adrian reassured the man and asked him to call Linfield and Edgar to the laboratory. The priest informed Leke that they would go to the top of the tower. The boy wanted to joke, asking if they would have to climb stairs, but he was surprised to learn they would ascend in a kind of elevator, activated by a magic circle. Adrian boasted about the vehicle to the boy, who had seen many like it in his world. They arrived at the Elder's laboratory. Lucy nudged the MC, as she had a bad feeling. Leke asked if there was any danger, but the girl didn't sense the presence of the dragon heart, so the MC told the elf they would focus on getting the sword and then leave. The priest then took some papers he was working on and handed them to the boy. Kuehl looked at the formulas and told the priest he would try to reproduce them. Then the Elder's 2 disciples arrived at the laboratory to help. Our hero wished to see the sword, but the priest wanted to know how the young man had defeated a level 7 mage, and he wasn't talking about Byron, but about Vister, the bald dark mage. Lee K realized he had fallen into a trap, and quickly instructed Lucy to flee the place. Then Adrian reached out to a magic globe and electrocuted our heroes before they could escape. Suddenly Lucy opened her eyes and hit LK with a flying kick, absorbing all the electric charge herself. She then spun and landed ready for combat, while Lee K, pinned against the shelf, thanked her for the peculiar way she saved him. The priest calmly ordered his disciples not to let them escape. Suddenly Edgar cast magic towards the duo, but Lucy moved one of the shelves to block it. However, LK couldn't move due to the shock, until he saw some barrels, and had an idea. The boy explained that the priest wanted to capture him, so he asked the elf to return to Delphin to request reinforcements from Lord Reyna. LK decided to surrender to the man, but Adrian was not convinced. Then the MC shouted to Lucy, and she promptly threw a barrel into the air, which began to spill gunpowder. The elder widened his eyes at such danger, but Kyle didn't hesitate and set the gunpowder on fire. People on the street saw the explosion at the top of the tower, and Lucy throwing herself out of the place. The girl fell in free fall towards the crowd, landing on her feet like a feline, but she glanced back, wishing the MC luck. Meanwhile, the boy was being overpowered by the silver-haired priest, who ordered the disciples to take him unconscious behind bars. LK woke up inside the cell, regretting not realizing the elder was a dark mage, and noticed he couldn't use magic. The boy hoped Lucy had escaped, because if anything happened to her, Reward would roast him alive. Adrian appeared in the cell and wanted to know why the hero fought against dark mages, but Kiel, indignant, threatened that the Tower of the Wise would judge the priest for that. Then he saw the black stream in the disciples' hands, and the priest became furious, assuming the MC wanted to give it to the elf with Delphin's blood. But shouting, he said the weapon only responded to its owner and had been useless since the Holy War. Leke observed every word of the priest, who continued to tell about the myth of the sword, which could cut anything when wielded by Rain Delphin, its creator, or the hero of the Holy War, Shastar. Leke decided to play along, and said his master had sent him to help Lucy wield the sword. Then the priest wanted to know who this master was, and our MC felt a knot in his stomach when the man said he would torture him if he lied, until the chains pinned him to the wall, and without hesitation, he told everything about the dragon, his mage training, and his level. Adrian still suspected the boy, and found it absurd for someone to reach level 5 in 100 days, so he ordered the disciple to torture the boy. Linfield conjured 2 circles on LK's head, but our hero felt no pain. However, he decided to pretend he was in great pain, and screamed in despair. And the disciple felt superior with his feeble magic, but found it strange because the boy revealed no valuable information. So he decided to take the MC to the Black Gate, mentioning there was someone there capable of extracting any secret. LK knew that name, and to not jeopardize his escape, said he would tell everything. He began to whisper, and when Linfield got closer, he delivered a strong headbutt to his opponent's nose. As the situation intensified, LK used a leg lock to immobilize the cowardly disciple, but when released, Linfield was so furious that he decided to cut our hero in half. However, before his magic could be cast, someone stopped him. Who would have thought? It was Palm, the thief. She bragged about arriving just in time. Kel was pleased to see her there, but the position in which he was immobilized was already bothering him. So the girl broke his shackles, and said she had gone to the tower with Lucy and Elysian, causing a great commotion because the wizards didn't want to let her in. Meanwhile, they went to find Lucy, who was happy because LK hadn't suffered any serious injuries. The trio followed a secret passage where Adrian was conducting macabre experiments, but LK couldn't escape without the sword to prove that the priest was aligned with the dark wizards, until he sensed the presence of something and conjured a shield against 2 wizards with skull masks, convinced that our hero was under the influence of mental torture. LK asked Lucy to look for the sword while Palm tried to escape discreetly. The wizards set up their magic circles, and LK launched a relentless attack. In the midst of the magical battle, Lucy attacked the masked wizards, but LK realized they were just mirages. The dark wizard cast an intensified spell, and LK, after blocking the attack with water, powerfully summoned the shadows. But the enemy was prepared and conjured an anti-magic wall. While Lucy tried to hit the real wizards, LK felt a hand weigh on his head, but the blow wasn't enough to knock him down, until he saw the globe Adrian used to shock them earlier, and asked Lucy to stay behind him. Then he concentrated all his mana, and fired arcane magic at the adversaries, causing another explosion at the top of the tower. The wizards searched for LK in the smoke, and suddenly, they felt the shock coursing through their bodies. Doyle felt satisfaction, seeing the enemies taste their own poison. Even Palm took the chance to land some blows on the incapacitated wizards. LK decided to take the tied-up prisoners, while Lucy and Palm went to look for the sword, but the elevator wouldn't work in LK's hands. Then suddenly, a large group of wizards appeared to ambush our hero. There was a multiple attack from the enemies, and our hero promptly defended himself, confident for having managed to recover some of his energy. But to not prolong the combat, he cast a spell on the elevator and began to fall, taking only the tied-up wizards. However, to avoid being crushed in the fall, he executed a gravity control spell, which despite the abrupt descent, was enough to save our hero and show everyone in Adrian's presence that there were dark wizards in the tower. The old man then ground his teeth and ordered Delphin's guards to leave the tower, but the men said they would only leave if Adrian cooperated with the investigation. The old man, however, resisted and accused the act of being a conspiracy by the Church of Light, inciting his disciples to attack. Then a battle began between the wizards and the clergy soldiers, and Keek saw the priest flee the scene. Maken threw the young man, who went straight to the priest but ended up crashing into a stone wall, conjured by the old man. Adrian took the opportunity to gain distance, and Keek Saul showed extreme physical exhaustion, climbing some flights of stairs, until, after much effort, he reached the top in front of a door. He slowly entered the room, suggesting that the priest surrender, but the man's voice echoed in the darkness, showing conviction that he would emerge victorious from that situation, as he knew exactly what to do to deceive the young king and his mother. Keek Saul faced the old man, and wanted to know why he wished to destroy the kingdom of Elua. Then Adrian revealed that Shustar's feat in defeating the demon needed to be avenged, and for that reason, he himself poisoned the king. But his next step of delivering the sword to the Black Gate was interrupted by our prodigy boy. However, the dark old man had a surprise, and suddenly, a giant monster appeared. One of his experiments, thirsty for the blood of young meddling wizards. The creature was a terrifying chimera, which Adrian proudly commented he had created using his master's instructions. LK found it an affront, as the creation of chimeras had been banned. As Adrian was certain he had reached the pinnacle of magical evolution. The monster charged at Kuel, who quickly activated teleportation and narrowly avoided being hit. LK needed to stay focused, as the monster was fierce, so he began unleashing his best spells against the creature. But nothing seemed to have any effect, as the priest had inserted an anti-magic stone into the monster. Kuel tried an air spell that cut the chimera's limbs, however its regenerative power was also impressive. To make matters worse, the priest decided to join the battle, keeping our protagonist on alert for the cowardly attack. He dodged the chimera's strike, but immediately afterward, the priest cast his spell. Kuel quickly conjured a shield to fend off the creature, and the old man was frenzied to see his project in action, until Kuel dismantled the shield to the priest's surprise, and quickly imprisoned the chimera with his magical ropes. Adrian summoned an air hammer, and Kuel ran as fast as he could, firing an arcane cannon at the monster. Our hero was weak but couldn't give up, so he gathered as much energy as he could to attack once more. Adrian immediately summoned a force wall, while the flash of Kuel's arcane power filled the area. The priest considered it insolence for the young man to keep fighting, but he knew little about our mage's accumulated energy, which trapped the monster behind a magical barrier, and ran off, proving to be relentless. Old Adrian was completely confused, and ordered the chimera not to let the young man escape. Kuel tried to block once more, and the serpent part of the monster advanced on the shield. The protagonist only had time to see the fangs approaching his face, but suddenly the beast's head was severed. Lucy, the savior elf, arrived, demonstrating all her power, and she wasn't alone. Palm was incredulous at the hideous monster, while Kuel received the Black Stream sword from Lucy, who said, "Now it's up to you." The protagonist was surprised by the weight of the sword, which had no edge. Adrian watched, certain that the weapon would be useless. The serpent limb began to regenerate in the creature, and Lucy ordered Kuel to quickly do what needed to be done. The young man synchronized the dragon heart with the seed in his body, feeling unbearable pain as the mana gradually flowed. Then he fell again into the parallel world of his consciousness, along with Acreon, who awaited his return. But in the current situation, the dragon didn't want to take much of the young man's time. Kuel was puzzled, and was thrown back into reality, much more powerful, with his staff and sword in hand, as he had unlocked the 7th magic circle. The priest quickly attacked, removing the gravity from the environment, causing our heroes to levitate. Kuel in turn cast his gravity control spell, and they returned to the ground, with Palm suffering a harsh fall. The old man was startled by the fact that Kuel still had mana, and had no idea that now our hero was going to start fighting seriously, as the priest knew nothing about the dragon heart. Lucy advanced against the chimera, executing the magic of her sword while the mages fiercely faced off. The combat was intense, with both giving their all. Lucy continued with her quick attacks, and when she wounded the monster, she felt a viscous liquid gush over her body. Adrian celebrated while the elf seemed motionless before the serpent, but the beast seemed to burst from the inside out, and Lucy rose in her flames, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. The priest was outraged but would need much more to defeat the formidable red-haired warrior from Arsenia. Palm was amazed by her friend's display of power while Adrian wondered how the poison hadn't worked, even though she was an elf, but Kuel knew it was because of the dragon blood. Lucy then charged once more, striking the monster's head, which suddenly delivered a brutal blow against the heroine, causing her to be thrown a few meters. Kuel and Palm were worried while Lucy got up, somewhat dazed. Palm noticed that the elf was in danger, and when Kuel tried to help her, the priest stood in his way. The chimera was ready to crush the girl until Palm gathered all the courage she had and advanced, burying Lucy's blade in the creature's eye. Kuel then threw the black stream to the elf, and explained that she had the Riyard blood necessary to awaken the sword. Adrian was perplexed by the revelation. Then Lucy wielded the sword and struck the monster, splitting it in half with a single blow, thus bringing hope back to our hero's eyes. Adrian then unleashed his power against the elf, but the sword in her hand was capable of cutting even magic, which left the priest completely terrified, and Lucy declared, "You're next, you decrepit old man." Adrian was shocked to see the sword come back to life, and wished he had eliminated the girl along with the Lord of Delphin. Kuehl ordered the old man to surrender, but the priest would never do that, and prepared to conjure another spell. However, this time he tried to escape, and our heroes ran to stop him, unsuccessfully, leaving Kuehl extremely furious. Lucy began to pant, and when Kuehl noticed her paleness, she said she was fine, but the protagonist knew the chimera's attack must have been devastating. So he suggested the elf climb onto his back. Even embarrassed, the girl ended up accepting to be carried, and the envious rogue also wanted to be carried. Meanwhile, Elysian led an attack against the mages, but Kuehl arrived, ordering them to end the fight, and dumped the remains of the chimera in the middle of the battle to prove Adrian had been corrupted. But the tower's disciples preferred to believe it was all a conspiracy. Kuehl raged for the men to surrender. However, the most loyal disciple preferred to fight but had his blow blocked by the protagonist, and was hit by a gust in the face, which threw him back. Elysian declared that if there was no surrender, all would be considered dark mages, so there was no escape. They surrendered. Leke noticed Lucy was not well, and shouted for Elysian because the elf had fainted. Leke was desperate, and Elysian went to check Lucy's vital signs, but incredibly, she was just sleeping. With everything resolved, Makan informed that the royal guard would take care of the tower, and the priestess reprimanded the protagonist for leaving without them. Meanwhile, Palm made a point of saying she was responsible for saving the mage. In Delphin, Lord Reyna thanked the heroes for their work, but emphasized that she wished they had captured Adrian, although it wasn't easy to catch a level 7 mage. Still, given the circumstances, they managed to recover the Black Stream, which, despite being disproportionate for Lucy, was a good sword. Jepes announced to the Lord that the kingdom had been summoned for a meeting, and all the heroes should attend as well. Reyna commented that the last meeting had been conducted by Empress Kalina von Andrian, and it would be important for the heroes to attend. The day of the meeting arrived, and Kala showed he was not used to that kind of formality, making a comment Lucy did not understand. Meanwhile, Reyna showed concern on her face. However, Lucy tried to comfort her younger sister. LK told Elysian that Adrian worked for the Black Gate. Then, the priestess supposed that the next target of the Dark Mages would be the Church of Light. The Empress arrived at the location, accompanied by the young king, and with an enigmatic look, she deduced that everyone knew the reason for the meeting. While the young monarch merely observed, Count Vetz took the floor and argued that the accusations against the priest had been forged, causing other nobles to agree with him. The young king tried to argue about the witnesses, but was interrupted by the manipulative empress, who without any ceremony, sentenced Lord Reyna to death. Elysian countered, stating that the church had already completed the interrogation, and that this decision went against royal protocol. Then, the count demanded to know where the captured dark mages were, but the priestess replied that they had been executed during the journey. The count suggested that the responsibility lay with the church, and insinuated that Delphin might have created the chimera, as there was a very powerful mage in the battle against Spellus. He then accused LK of being a dark mage. If he could, the young mage would have launched a fireball at the liar's face. The count incited the guards to arrest the lord and the heroes, a request immediately supported by the other nobles. Kuehl, who was already expecting a trap, just waited for the right moment to attack them all, until a man named Duke Corpus von Barben asked to speak. With an imposing posture, he concluded that the count's accusations were false. The man tried to convince those present that denying Adrian was a dark mage would insult the intelligence of the other kingdoms. But the empress was eager to silence the duke, and when von Barben and Count Vetz began to argue, the woman ordered everyone to be silent. She announced that the king would give his verdict and cast an intimidating look at the boy. Initially, the boy seemed to let the empress decide, as he always did. The woman began to speak, stating that Adrian was loyal to the kingdom, and suggesting that the monarch acquit the priest. However, von Barben tried to convince him otherwise. The king then decided to listen to the other nobles. One of those present was in favor of the newly arrived duke, but the empress emphasized that the opposition was in the minority. Then, the king ordered the guards to enter the hall and asked the empress a rhetorical question, questioning if she would confuse a deer with a horse. The woman did not understand the purpose of the question, but replied that it would be impossible to confuse the two animals. It was then that the young man began to vent about the years of repressed reign, during which all decisions had been made by others. He cornered the empress with his words, and demanded to know where her loyalty lay. The woman, judging that the king was exhausted, ordered the guards to take him away, but the guards hesitated, confused about who truly held royal authority at that moment. The boy then suggested that the empress should be the one to retire to rest. The woman was petrified when the king ordered her to be taken to another palace. She reacted with extreme fury. After all, she demanded to be treated as the supreme ruler. But it was the king who gave the orders there, and the young monarch had finally decided to take control of his kingdom. The guards took the woman, who screamed desperately, appealing to motherhood. But when the door closed, the king wanted to know who else would defend Adrian, the traitor, and he showed knowledge of all the schemes the man had been carrying out in the kingdom recently. This left Count Vetz trembling with fear. As for Lord Reyna, the king thanked her and promised to reward her for everything, in addition to investigating her father's death and punishing those responsible. In tears, Lord Reyna thanked him, even moving Duke von Barben. The king ended the meeting, but before letting our heroes leave, he asked about the Black Stream. Then Lucy said that the sword was with her, showing indifference. This embarrassed Reyna, due to her sister's lack of manners with the monarch, but the young man overlooked the situation. After all, Lucy was a half-elf. The king then asked for the sword back. However, the elf was quite direct and said she still needed it, and when she was about to talk about her father, Kjol quickly covered the girl's mouth. He tried to explain that it was love at first sight for the elf when using the sword, which left the king incredulous, because the blade had not been awakened even by him, a direct descendant of Shustar. Moreover, according to reports, the sword was forged by an unknown blacksmith, and it could only be awakened by someone with great strength and tenacity. Kjol wondered how much Reyna knew about the sword before embedding the dragon heart in it. Meanwhile, the king decided to leave the sword with Lucy, mainly due to the threat of the dark wizards. Then, he wished for Reyna to stay in the castle to help him. The protagonist was worried about the possibility of Lucy wanting to stay with her sister, as he knew that without her, the mission would be impossible, and to our mage's relief, she decided to leave with him. The king understood the situation and asked if the heroes needed anything, but Li Ke only asked the young man to take care of Delphin. The sisters said goodbye, but Lucy wanted to make it clear that this was not a farewell. Reyna thanked Li for the assistance, and Lucy asked the lord to keep the flaming sword. The young woman shouted Riyard's name, and the blade quickly became incandescent. Thus the sisters had their own swords linked by Riyard's blood. The carriage departed, and that day, the red-haired family had hope for better days. The journey continued, tediously, while Lucy insisted for LK to unlock the dragon heart. Then McCann commented that they would pass by the Sage's Tower where mercenaries usually bought supplies, and Elysian remarked that every mage should visit the place at least once in their life. Lucy agreed with the priestess, and Kjol boldly lay on the elf's lap to relax, but the girl immediately pushed him away, and ordered him to quickly absorb the stone from the sword, which suddenly emitted a light against the will of our procrastinating mage. Then, he was taken to a parallel world. A Creon received him as he had on previous occasions, and Li Ke wanted to know if he was bothering the sage. But for a Creon, it made no difference, as all of it was spatial memory. Kjol wanted to know if he could become an Archmage, and also use dark magic. The father of dragons, with a stern expression, replied that the young man could only achieve that by making a pact with a demon, but Kjol was confused about which power was greater. A Creon was not willing to prolong the conversation, and decided to get straight to the point, conjuring a magic circle. Then, he transferred a large amount of magic to Kjol, so that he would stay focused and stop having dangerous ideas. Meanwhile, Lucy had already tied him up in the physical plane as a precaution, until the painful magical process of our hero came to an end. Little by little, they approached Melkia, a quiet town preceding the Sage's Tower, but the streets were filled with people. Kjol noticed that the place wasn't so quiet after all, which left Makin confused. Elysian also found the place different, and Palm saw many opportunities to make money there. The priestess recognized some mages on an excursion, and Lucy detected a dungeon nearby. This might explain to Makin the high number of people, as dungeons were usually filled with treasures. Still, Palm and Elysian were intrigued by so many people, but Lucy just wanted to eat, so Litir decided to look for a restaurant. They entered a tavern that was completely packed. Kjol overheard a pair talking about hiring mercenaries, until he recognized Jenny's blue hair. The young woman also recognized our hero, making him blush. Next to the young woman was the little mage Luki, also happy to see him again. Palm, like any feline, was suspicious, but Makin received a warm hug from the blue-haired mercenary. Then Kjol opened his arms, eager to receive the same affection from the girl, but he only received a pat on the head. Luki found it amusing because he knew Jenny wasn't one to hug just anyone, but he soon trembled when he saw Lucy, who was devouring a pork shank, and tried to talk to her. Then Kjol found it amusing because he knew that when Lucy was eating, she didn't care about anything else. Our mage introduced Palm as the group's thief, but the girl quickly corrected him, stating that she had evolved into a treasure hunter. Kjol wanted to know the news from young Luki. Then the blonde boy, bothered by the noise, cast a spell to create a zone of silence around them. This left Palm and Kjol impressed with the new trick. The boy then boasted that he had reached level 5, and he confessed that our protagonist was the source of inspiration for his effort. But to the young man's despair, Kjol revealed that he was already in the 7th circle. Lucy confirmed Kjol's evolution, and the blonde boy was completely disheartened. Unlike Jenny, who congratulated our mage on his talent, Elysian was curious about why the pair was in those lands, but that was a mystery. However, the pair said they were pursuing someone who might be in the dungeon, and Kjol, curious, asked who it was. Jenny revealed they were pursuing Trinity, leaving our mage perplexed, as she was one of the 5 heroes. But the mercenary explained that they were seeking the bow that belonged to the heroine, and Kjol looked at Lucy to see her reaction. Then, Elysian said that the bow had been forged by the elves and contained the power of the 4 elements, and that's why Jenny wanted a stronger weapon to fight against the dark mages. The protagonist whispered to the elf, asking if there was such a bow in her house, but the girl replied that she had never seen anything like it. For according to the reports, the heroine left the bow in the mortal world to be used by someone worthy, and according to the mercenary, the dungeon appeared near the Melphis Canyon, the last place where the bow was seen. Then, Lucy remembered that her mother had asked her to visit the canyon when she was among humans, and Jenny was astonished when she discovered that Trinity was the elf's mother. Lucy let slip that he was impressed by the fact that Lucy's mother was a heroine, but Keel didn't like the young man's familiarity. Jenny deduced that the bow belonged to the elf, but Lucy stated that she was already satisfied with her Blackstream bow. However, the mercenary asked for the hero's help, as she didn't feel worthy of wielding Trinity's magical bow, and Palm was pleased when Jenny mentioned she would pay the group for the service. Keel commented that they were heading to the Sage's Tower, and Lucy found it pertinent, as the master of the place indeed wanted to meet our mage. Then, the duo offered to guide the heroes to the tower, believing that Lucy would bring them luck in their quest for the bow. Since they had all been battle partners before, they accepted the deal promptly. The next day, they headed to the canyon, which once served as a refuge for the dark wizards. There was a rumor that the dungeon was created by the wizard hero Lionel to protect the Trinity bow. Jenny mentioned that the wizard had feelings for the archer, and Kuehl lamented the fact that his love was unrequited. Lucy confirmed that before she was born, there was a persistent man who used to send long romantic letters to her mother. Elysian was worried about the possibility of other adventurers being after the bow, but Jenny commented that no one knew about the artifact. Kuehl wanted to understand why so many people were after the dungeon. Jenny explained that the place held a lot of magic and had appeared in a forbidden area. The more difficult a dungeon was, the greater its treasure. That's why even the wizards from the Tower of the Wise were heading there. Kuehl supposed that Lionel's staff might also be in the dungeon. But Luki, who was listening to the conversation next to Makan, said that the staff was in the possession of the master of the Tower of the Wise. The place was crowded. Jenny warned them to be careful with the undead, making our wizard apprehensive. Meanwhile, Elysian found it insulting that necromancers wouldn't let the dead rest. Makan reassured the group, as the undead were no match for Elysian's sacred power. Luki consulted a map, advising that they could avoid the monsters, until a young man named Anthony, the Duke's son, suggested that they all enter together to avoid being overwhelmed by the creatures. But the group didn't fall for the noble's ploy. Taken by anger, he decided to advance ahead of everyone. Kuehl was curious about the man who, according to Luki, was worth less than a count. The group followed the path even with the Duke's son going ahead, and the blonde wizard felt chills, as entire armies had already succumbed at that point of the path. Kuehl grumbled because the passage was very narrow, and soon realized they were in an ambush, with several furious orcs surrounding them. But suddenly, Kuehl remembered Sapphire's talking about the orcs, and his own intense training. The boy was ready for this kind of situation, and decided to show his claws, or rather his lightning, leaving the duo seeking the bow, perplexed by our hero's motivation. The orcs were not intimidated, while Duke Anthony also organized his troop for the battle. But Lucy, fearless, decided to face the monsters alone, leaving the young Duke indignant. But the elf charged into the attack, and began cutting down the creatures with immense ease, leaving the adventurers impressed, while Kuehl also showed great motivation, electrocuting several monsters at once, until Lucy noticed something underground, and everyone began to lose balance with a tremor, when suddenly, several giant worms emerged hungry, causing many adventurers to give up on the treasure. Kuehl launched a fireball at one of the worms, but Lucy warned that the protagonist had aimed at the wrong side of the creature. Then everyone aimed at the monsters' heads, and Jenny drew several arrows to reduce the margin of error, which flew and hit the targets squarely. Elysian, furious, also invoked her sacred power, strengthening the group's tiger, who lifted a rock full of fury against the creatures, then threw it to crush the hole from which they emerged. Palm thought the great tiger was extremely excited about the battle, while the adventurers noted the immense skill of that group. The Duke was also impressed, but soon noticed another attack, and quickly protected his knight. Kiang promptly summoned earth spears against the last opponent. The orcs, seeing the group's overwhelming power, retreated and fled, while Palm, who hadn't done anything, sent them away with attitude. Elysian began tending to the wounded, and Anthony approached Kiang to thank him for his help, inviting the group of heroes to join his team. But before responding, Elysian wanted to know why the Duke was going to the dungeon. The man revealed that, according to reports, there was a lot of gold left by the dark wizards, and that would be enough to save his kingdom. That's why he brought Talion, the man he saved, because he was a scholar of the canyon. Kael didn't reveal why he was there, so the Duke left with his historian. But Lucian commented to Lysian that this story about the dark wizard's treasure was a lie. Our protagonist then wondered if the Duke had bad intentions. Lucian recounted that Solas, the kingdom of Duke Anthony, suffered greatly against Silenon since the Holy War over the lands of Kansas, mainly due to its location and the influence of the Tower of the Wise, founded by Lionel. Despite being weakened, McCann mentioned that the kingdom had 3 beautiful princesses, and our mage was immediately interested, especially in Princess Irina, who easily enchanted everyone. But the girls in the group quickly dashed the protagonist's hopes, stating that there were already many beautiful women around. Lucy promptly told Lucy that he had eyes for no one else. Suddenly, Tian smelled something strange, and thus they noticed several soldiers' bodies strewn on the ground. But our mages didn't just smell the odor of the corpses. There was a strong presence of sulfur in the air, coming from hellhounds that appeared on the scene. The adventurers prepared their defenses, and a fight began against the beasts, which were repelled with every step they advanced, until one of the dogs came face to face with Talion, the historian, leaving the Duke worried about losing his guide. But the beast was eliminated by Kjoln's magic. Another beast was ready to spit fire, but Kjoln took down the hellhound before its attack, and Lucy attacked the animal, demonstrating that one should not play with danger. Lucy suggested they defeat whoever was controlling them, and Palm pointed to an imposing dog that was clearly the leader of the pack. The rogue decided to fight the leader monster and launched into the attack. Palm's whip wrapped around the beast's neck. Then she began to pull it to dominate it in battle. Lucy intimidated the monster with her black sword, and Lucy was impressed with her combat skills. When the group thought they would rest, a wave of goblins came to attack them. Lee Kjoln took a deep breath, knowing they would have a lot of work. Lucy advanced fiercely against the goblins, handling the situation with ease. But the rest of the group was exhausted or injured, and Elysian noticed that more than half had already deserted out of fear. Kjol saw many with their hopes shattered, until Lucy called the protagonist to see one of the fallen soldiers, who had written in blood about the shadow hovering in the dungeon. The heroes noticed the mist that seemed to intimidate anyone who approached, and Kjol suggested they better prepare to explore the place. Elysian and Lucy also felt that the danger inside the dungeon was much greater. While the other adventurers murmured about the presence of the undead, the Duke whispered with Talion. Kjol then sharpened his hearing to listen to what the men were discussing, but was almost discovered by the noble's keen perception. The sun set, and Anthony's soldiers wished not to advance, so the Duke decided to camp. Around the campfire, Letion wanted to know more about the Kingdom of Solace, and Lucy recounted that one of the princes had died in the Kansas War. Suddenly, Talion called Kjol to talk, inviting him to work in the Kingdom of Solace, but Letion said he already knew about their war against Silenon. Talion, then outraged, recounted that they were under extortion from the enemy kingdom, besides having brutally murdered the prince. Kjol, noticing the man's anger, wanted to know what they intended to do if they found the treasure, but the historian replied that it was not up to him to decide, begging our hero to accept the offer. But Kjol had his own demands and wished the man good luck, who walked away muttering about revenge and lack of hope, and our protagonist felt a twinge of remorse. But the next day, upon waking, they had a surprise. The entire group of Duke Anthony had disappeared. Luki felt guilty, as he was on guard, but saw not a single suspicious movement during the night. Then, McCann warned that the men went through the dangerous valley. Alien didn't understand why the Duke had left, but for Palm, the reason was always money. However, Kjol concluded that there was a lie about the treasure of the Black Mages, for the troop was too small to carry such a reward, and the historian Talion, according to the protagonist, was rather strange, besides having heard the Duke call him prince, and McCann deduced that the man was Archant himself, heir to the throne. So there was something more important than the Trinity Bow in this endeavor. Luki had a flash and supposed it could be the wand of the Black Mage Jason, and the Command Ring, an artifact created by Ragdam himself, capable of controlling bodies, and Kjol deduced from the conversation he had with the prince that they were indeed after the ring. Palm tried to track the group's movement, but they were too fast. Then Kjol suggested that the Crown Prince knew exactly where the ring was, possibly being a dark mage himself. Luki found it contradictory, as the man had never used magic, but to our mage, there were other ways to manipulate mana. The young blonde was impressed, thinking the prince might have made a pact with a demon. For the dark mage Jason had made a pact with the demon Samazina, and if the prince had made a deal with the same demon, it was very likely he knew where the wand was, besides becoming a necromancer. Until the mage's reasoning was broken by Palm's scream, as several skeletons began to approach. The monsters advanced mercilessly, and Makan, who now had the Hand of Fire, counterattacked. However, Palm was desperate, because even without heads, the skeletons still moved. Then Luki explained that they should attack the bodies of the bony creatures, and Makan followed through with his meteor punches. Lucy discovered that the black stream magic could break dark magic. Then Elysian, with her holy power, made the souls trapped in the bones rest, and Palm snuggled up to the priestess, calling her an older sister. Kunik suggested that the young woman not expend too much of her divine power, but Elysian said she was calm because the skeletons were very weak compared to her. Elysian noticed that the dead soldiers hadn't been there for long, and from the footprints Palm supposed the skeletons were protecting someone. Kudux was outraged that the prince had killed his own allies, and decided he should stop him. Palm announced that someone was watching them, and gradually the mist dissipated, revealing Anthony extremely injured, so much so that not even Elysian would be able to heal him. Kudux still tried to ask the Duke where Archant was, and the man mumbled about the Kingdom of Solace and Princess Irina. Then, he stopped breathing. Lucy sensed someone approaching, and Prince Arkant appeared ominously as a necromancer, asking what had happened to Anthony. Then, he lamented his death, explaining that he was the only survivor. Kodak's Wall, indignant, wanted to know why the prince got involved with dark magic, but the man was capable of anything to protect his kingdom, although this was not a justification for Li Sheng, for thus the Kingdom of Solace would be known for raising the undead. But Arkant only thought of revenge, and our protagonist lost patience, conjuring his circles against the necromancer, who protected himself with a wall of the dead, leaving the mages perplexed by the disgusting type of magic. And not satisfied, the sorcerer summoned an army of zombies to attack our heroes. The mages used their tricks to defend themselves, as did the other heroes, while the monsters sprouted from the ground. Palm, who couldn't stand the stench, hid behind Elysian, who once again used her magical prayers to save the souls of the zombies. However, the magic was useless against the command ring, and thus the undead returned as many times as Arkant wanted. LK resorted to his arcane energy, but it was also not enough to bring down the dark sorcerer. Luki was perplexed at how much LK had evolved, but our mage told the boy to stop being envious and focus on the fight. Luki, wasting no time, was cutting down the moribund, and Arkant widened his eyes at the sight of the elf's magical sword. Elysian, in turn, used a more powerful enchantment to interfere with the dark magic, but the prince trusted that his army would always stand. Luki commented that he was already running out of mana, and Kuel teased the boy for his lack of energy. Our hero launched another combo, but the zombies seemed infinite, leaving Arkant confident in his victory. But Elysian didn't want to lose her friends again, and she prayed to the heavens for more power, which responded promptly, leaving the necromancer dazzled by the light. Kuel noticed that the priestess's bracelet shone intensely. The priestess echoed a mantra of light, leaving the sorcerer impacted by the energy he did not know, or in which he had stopped believing after the death of his brother and the members of his kingdom. Then, he summoned all the possible zombies, but the priestess stood firm in her faith. Light and shadow clashed intensely, and Li Ke decided to help Elysian, calling Luchi to create a barrier, and Jenny to aim at the sorcerer when there was an opening. The archer prepared herself, while the mages spent all their mana to conjure a double magic. Arkant still deemed the hero's action useless, but the felines in the group also didn't want to be left out. However, the necromancer's magic hit them, and Li Ke asked the friends not to get too close, until a rift broke in the enemy's blockade, which was enough for Jenny's arrow, that traveled through space towards Arkant, hitting Anthony's zombie form squarely. The Prince of Darkness burst into laughter, even more confident in his power. But he didn't expect the surprise attack from Lucy and her black blade. Arkant fell, but his consciousness still wanted to save his people, and Kill noticed this spark of light in the darkness. But the man's fate was meant to be hell. Kill broke the evil crown, which according to Lucy, was made with the devil's horn. Elysian healed their friends, and Jenny commented that despite needing to find the bow, she thought it would be better to leave, apologizing for dragging the friends due to her greed. However, Kill tried to calm the archer, as everyone knew the risks. McKen encouraged the girl. As with the valley free of the curse, many adventurers would explore the place. Wiki didn't accept them giving up, as the bow was a priority for Jenny to fight against the Black Gate. The archer changed her mind, and Kill wanted to know more about the dungeon and Lionel. But Lucy was intrigued by how someone as strong as the MC knew so little about Arsenia, and ended up leaving our foreign mage without knowing what to say. Then the young man told that Lionel was the son of a farmer, until he met a traveler, full of parables. But the boy was smart, and thus happened the meeting between the future hero mage and his master, Kirasis, who taught the magical signs to the boy, leading him to reach level 8 at just 25 years old. Then, when the Holy War occurred, Kirasis' tower was affected, and Lionel was in the dilemma between fighting the Dark Mage or saving the tower, until Shustar convinced the mage to fight against the Dark Mages to later build the Sage's tower. Luki continued, saying that Lionel reached level 9 at 30 years old, but Leonchi aimed to reach that level sooner, as he couldn't wait to defeat the Dark Mages and return to his peaceful life in Korea. The conversation was good, but the group reached the dungeon gate, and the mages were worried, as the place emanated very powerful magic. Palm, who also found the place dangerous, suggested entering through the back door, but Lucy, as always, went ahead without fear, and flung the door open, to LK's despair. In that great hall, Palm immediately got excited to search for treasures. The place seemed smaller inside, and Kuel doubted that Lionel had built it alone. Just to be sure, the MC decided to detect the presence of traps, and suddenly conjured a magic missile, which Luki found too bold. However, the magic floated and lodged in the wall, which, to LK, had the power to absorb mana. Then they noticed that the dungeon was filled with level 9 magic that didn't allow conjuring objects, affecting only physical attributes. Palm understood absolutely nothing, and Kuel explained that the mages couldn't use magic inside. With that, McCann hoped that nothing too dangerous would appear. And for the first time, the rogue told the mages to stay behind her to protect them. They found 2 golems in front of a door, which moved and blocked the entrance with their swords, until Lucy found a tombstone with a riddle that could lead them deeper or out of the dungeon. Lucy supposed that Lionel himself had written the riddle. Then Palm stepped forward and said it was just a matter of asking the right golem which door led to the dungeon's interior. Something simple. But Kuehl, impatient with Palm's nonsense, informed that they could only ask one question. Then she understood and said that, in that case, it was fine. Lucy commented that Lionel was an expert in creating golems. Jenny supposed there was no answer to the riddle, but Lee K found it unlikely. Lucy, however, told them to ask quickly, or she would attack the figures. And Makan gave the elf a massage to relax her. Kyle suddenly decided to ask the decisive question, and the group was curious to know the result. Then, the golem told them to go to the right, and Kyle informed the group that they should go to the left. Palm was a bit apprehensive about the stone creature's lie, but Luki demonstrated great skill in manipulation and persuasion in the riddle, which caused admiration. And, in the end, logic prevailed. They decided to confidently go left. Kyle mentioned he was learning about lies from the thief, who was quite upset. Meanwhile, Jenny congratulated the MC on his insight. Kyle gave the order, and the left door opened, while Palm kept grumbling, as wizard riddles were more annoying than she thought. Suddenly Kyle felt a headache, and Makan suggested they take a break. So they sat down, and the MC started feeling sleepy, until he fell asleep and saw Lionel talking to Trinity about Showstar's impulses, and later about the command circle, which was made from a demon's horn. Therefore, Lionel would try to seal the artifact, so it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. But the elf said that this mission shouldn't be their concern. Then she wanted to know if the wizard wanted to destroy the command ring or keep it. Lionel took a deep breath and agreed with Trinity that things should be left as they were, until the MC felt a jolt, and woke up with a punch from Lucy, because he was drooling and snoring. Helke realized he was dreaming, until they saw other golems blocking the door, and to Palm's despair, the blonde wizard identified another riddle. But this time, it was similar to a math problem. Kehul suggested they read it several times until they understood. While the group struggled to interpret it, Luki started doing the calculations, until the MC, with a serene expression, seemed close to finding the solution to the problem, because in his original world, he was an academic test examiner, so he found the answer, and shared it with Luki. The door opened, and suddenly, another complex puzzle appeared, involving a chicken, a fox, corn, and a canoe. In the end, they needed to figure out how many trips the person needed to make without the animals devouring each other or the food, and with another correct answer, the other door opened, which, for Leaky, was easier than facing monsters. But something behind him caught the hero's attention. Lionel and Trinity were talking in front of a rock about the magic bow, pondering how much man's greed would make him misuse magic, and for that reason, he decided to build the dungeon. Leaky widened his eyes, unsure if it was a kind of dream or mirage, but he asked Lucy if her mother's hair was blue. The elf confirmed and wanted to know the reason for the question, but the boy evaded, and noticed that the visions were of Trinity and Lionel. Another riddle about a golem appeared, and when Kuehl asked Luki if any were missing in the sage's tower, the blonde said yes, but it required level 9 magic to activate it. They moved on to another slightly more philosophical riddle, about barbers and paradoxes, which left Palm extremely confused, and after much thought, Lee K chose the second door. The golem suggested the MC switch doors as a bonus chance. Palm and Lucy chose different doors, and there was a discussion about who was right, but Kuehl decided to opt for the third door, which was Lucy's choice, and said he would enter, but if he didn't return, the group should attack golem number 2. Then Jenny decided to go with him. The two crossed the portal, which emitted a strong light. However, upon opening his eyes, Kuehl no longer saw the archer, and Lionel was in front of him, as if waiting for him. Lee K was worried about his friend, but the wizard said she was just undergoing a test. The MC wanted to know the answer to the last riddle, and Lionel explained that there was no answer, just the right opportunity for his successor. Lee K was confused by the mention of a successor, and mentioned that there was another wizard in the dungeon besides him, but the legendary hero was sure that Lee Kuehl was the chosen one. The MC was perplexed, as he wasn't even part of the council, but still, Lionel felt familiar magical waves in the boy, and began to talk about his master, who had the same training characteristics as Sapphire's. It was then that the protagonist was completely surprised, and assumed that Caresis was the name she adopted among humans. Li Yunxing also concluded that his master was a dragon. That said, both were trained by the same master, therefore, Li Yunxing was Li Yunxing's successor. The wizard confessed that Ragdoom was more powerful than him, and for that reason he had the idea to create a magic that could bring his successor to finish the war he couldn't win. Li Yunxing saw a magic circle around him and asked if the supreme mage would not give him a grimoire, or an instruction manual. But he became irritated when Li Yunxing suggested transferring the magic directly to his body, so he shouted, asking if the mage was in love with Trinity, but he denied it. Then he cast the spell to evolve the boy, who agonized as he had before. When Kuehl returned, he found himself next to Luki. The boy explained that everything turned white for everyone, and suddenly they were outside the dungeon. Kuehl revealed he had found Li Yunxing's consciousness, which lived in the dungeon. Despite the euphoria, the blonde wanted to know what the supreme mage had said. Li Yunxing said he received a technique, but still didn't know how to use it. Then he wanted to know where Jenny was, but she hadn't returned. Suddenly she appeared carrying the legendary bow. Palm thought the bow was normal, but Lucy explained that the weapon still carried the power of the 4 elements. Lucy noticed that the bowstring was made with her mother's hair, and asked how Jenny got it. The girl said she took a test and discovered that one of her ancestors was an elf, and therefore she could master the 4 elements. Jenny thanked her friends, but the rogue grumbled for not finding any treasure. In the city tavern, many rumors circulated about the dungeon's disappearance. Cool noticed that the news traveled faster than the wind. 2 men were talking about the kingdom of Kudrin. This worried LK, especially when they mentioned Leonhardt and a rumor about the king's death. He couldn't contain himself and paid for drinks for the men in exchange for information. He was surprised to learn that the king of Kudrin had been assassinated, and suspicion fell on the son, Leonhardt. Queen Isabel had the military arrest him, but the prince had already left. Additionally, the guards responsible for the king's protection were transferred from the sector the same night, suffering tragic accidents. Cool pondered, as the assassin eliminated any witnesses. The men continued, reporting that after the incident, Prince Leonhardt went to the Rusk mansion, where his grandfather was, and revealed that the Black Gate had infiltrated the royal palace, and through magic, made Queen Isabel, who was sterile, have a child. Thus Prince Joan was born, who should have his soul filled with dark magic. Then the mage Christopher was assigned to inspect the king, who declined and replaced the court mage. In light of this, there were signs of a new war for the kingdom of Kudrin. The 2 men began to argue about which side to support, and Cool discreetly withdrew, as he already had enough information. Makan and Elysian were worried about the rumor involving their friend Leo. Meanwhile, Jenny and Luki were astonished to discover that the knight was actually the Prince of Kudrin. The archer decided to go to the kingdom to fight against the dark mages. Kuchurl said he needed to visit the sage's tower to see the master, as he was Lionel's successor. Then Luki offered to take the protagonist, who didn't like the idea of having the annoying boy by his side. The next day, Jenny said goodbye to the heroes, until someone mysterious approached Lechlib, asking if he had returned from the Melphus Canyon. But Lechlib wanted to know first who the person was. Then the guard tried to confront him for his insolence, but the hooded figure restrained him. She revealed herself as Irina, the Princess of Solace. Luki was enchanted by the girl's beauty. She asked if the group had seen Duke Anthony and his guards. Kuel then told her about the man's death to the zombies, and lied that when they arrived, the dungeon had closed. The princess cried, feeling guilty. She said that the king of Sulanon had proposed marriage to her in exchange for reducing taxes, but her heart belonged to someone else. Kuel then remembered that Anthony mentioned the girl's name before dying. Luki commented that the king was elderly but had several mistresses. Irina also asked if the historian Talion died painfully. Even though Kuel remembered that Lucy brutally eliminated the necromancer, he lied, saying the death was peaceful. He then suggested that the girl flee, as she didn't want to marry the old king, and offered help to the princess. But she knew she couldn't change her destiny, and when she was about to say more, she fell silent. She decided to stop bothering our hero. He watched the girl leave. Then Luki commented that if they hadn't stopped Archant, they could have prevented this tragedy with the princess. But Keel warned the boy that if the man had won, he wouldn't have stopped at just the kingdom of Silanon. Luki agreed, sorrowfully, and Luki felt that if he could, he would embrace all of Arsenia. On the way to the sage's tower, Luki explained how the place was organized, praising the school, which was of the highest level. Keel mentioned that he knew about the so-called inner circle, and Luki made a point of saying he was part of it. Luki was eager to know the level of the tower's members. Then McCann informed them that they had arrived, leaving the MC impressed with the size of the tower. Luki identified himself as a member of the tower to a guard, and when they entered, Luki noticed how crowded the city was, as the tower was also a tourist spot. Luki saw a girl approaching, recognizing Senior Amber, who was also a disciple of his master. The young blonde introduced his friends to the mage, and Kuel whispered that the young woman was very beautiful, but the girl didn't like the two whispering and asked which tower our MC would go to, but Kuel replied that he had been trained in the mountains. However, the girl scoffed at such information. Then they reached the tower, and found a group of level 6 disciples of another master, but Kuel felt the atmosphere was a bit tense, especially when Amber commented ironically that Kuel had learned magic outside the tower. Senior disciple Firel remarked with a haughty air that what mattered were the skills. Then Elysian promptly praised Li Kei, and the tower duo laughed. Luki also didn't like his colleague's attitude, but Kuel humbly asked to let it go. Firel warned Li Kei not to hide his level and left, disdainfully asking Luki to take care of the guests. Until another disciple looked at the MC, belittling whoever might have taught him. At that moment the insult went too far, and Li Kei couldn't hold back. "Repeat what you said, you insolent." And furious, he ordered the boy to take back his words. Luki deduced that the disciple's master was a terrible teacher, because he didn't teach good manners, leaving the arrogant tower member irritated this time. And Firel ordered the half-elf to apologize, but Kuel shouted that he would only do so if they apologized first. Then the group of mages challenged Li Kei to go to the training field, and Luki apologized to the MC for his colleague's arrogance. Li Kei didn't mind, and when he learned that the bold one was level 4, he promised to teach him a lesson. The two faced off in the training arena, and Harold threatened to make Lee K eat his words, even giving our MC the chance to start attacking, and Kyul sincerely wished he had the boy's self-esteem. Harold continued, saying he would dismember our hero, but Kyul, before starting, wanted to know if no one would interfere in the fight, and Senior Farewell swore he wouldn't. Then Kyul began with his air hammer, hitting the opponent squarely, which made Farewell sweat on his forehead, and the other disciples were left speechless by our mage. But while Harold trembled on the ground, Kyul went to deliver the final blow, mercilessly, for the insult to his master. However, he suddenly conjured his shield, as he was attacked by Senior Farewell, who ordered the fight to end. Then Kyul, outraged, wanted to know when the inner circle started teaching cowards. Amber reminded Farewell that interfering in a fight was against the rules, but the boy didn't listen to the girl, who was outraged. However, Farewell stepped forward to fight our mage, but Kyul showed no fear of the blonde. Farewell attacked first, and Kyul conjured a wall of fire as a block. The disciple noticed that the MC wasn't joking, so he quickly conjured 2 circles to attack again. And this time, Loke felt his vision blurred, but with just one move, he dispersed the enemy's magic, leaving Farewell incredulous. Then the tower disciple resorted to hellfire magic. However, Loke knew how to stop it, invoking ice horns. The 2 magics clashed, and the horn pierced through the fire, almost hitting the bully. Kyul suggested that the arrogant one hit him with arcane magic, but the technique seemed unknown to Farewell. So our hero decided to show what it meant to be a true mage, launching a devastating arcane blast. However, someone suddenly stepped in front of Farewell and blocked the blow, and thus Kyul met the boy's master with great mustaches. Farewell then began to twist the situation for the master, positioning himself as the victim. The man said he would investigate the facts and ordered Kyul to step back, but the boy was rebellious. Then Luki announced that Master's side was one of the 7 sages. The man asked if Kyul Tebe would obey him now, but Kyul simply said that if he wasn't welcome he would leave the tower. He tried to tell his version of the events, but the master simply launched an arcane cannon at the young man, who promptly created a barrier. Side was surprised by the boy's technique, and wanted to know who he was. Confidently, he replied, "I am LK," but the mustached man wanted to know who his master was, and Kyul explained that his disciples had insulted his master. Side looked disapprovingly at Farewell, and Kyul demanded that the master make his student apologize, but Side told LK to calm down. Without wasting time, the mage said that the master should teach his disciples better. Then the man couldn't hold back and launched an attack, sending several meteors. LK welcomed them and conjured several fireballs. Farewell was rooting for his master, but someone appeared and disapproved of the disciples' attitude. Luki widened his eyes at the presence of the man, who quickly dissipated both attacks. Kyul was impressed by the man's power. With a gentle appearance, he was called White. Luki welcomed his master, who was happy for the boy's return. LK introduced himself to Master White, and judged him extremely young. However, the man took the comment as a compliment. Then Luki proudly explained that White was the youngest master of the tower. The mustached master complained about the interruption of the duel, but LK promptly said that the man had also interrupted his duel. Amidst that discussion, Amber asked to speak. She wanted to tell the whole truth. Master White decided to listen to the girl. After learning what happened, he explained that a master was closer to a mage than a relative. He then suggested that Harold apologize to LK. LK forgave the young disciple curtly and considered the matter resolved. Then the master called for Farewell, who was terrified, and asked for his staff, which he then broke unceremoniously. He then instructed Luki to guide the guests. But the mustached master did not take well to the young Master White's attitude. The group traveled by a magical elevator. They were enchanted by the view as the vehicle ascended. Luki noticed that Kyul was not as impressed as the others, but in truth he felt homesick because there was a similar elevator in Korea. Later, Amber stopped in front of a door and knocked, finding everything very quiet. Suddenly, Kyul opened the door with a sleepy expression and startled the girl. However, Li Yunxing was more startled to learn that the master wanted to see him. On the way, Amber apologized for the joke and suggested they become good friends. Kyul was embarrassed, but accepted. Then, Amber took the opportunity to ask a bit more about how Kyul acquired such skill. She casually supposed that fighting against dark mages was the path to evolution. Li Yunxing entered Master White's office, who praised him for his work in the Melphus Canyon. Without beating around the bush, the young man asked if there was a master named Marcus in the inner circle. White said that formally, there was no one by that name, but informally, there was a very skilled orphan disciple of the great master, who was called Marco. However, when the boy reached level 3 and could no longer evolve, he left the tower and changed his name. White then wanted to know what connection Kyul's master had with the sage's tower. Kyul thought it would be better to use a warning since everyone wanted to know where he came from. White then revealed that he researched the boy but was unsuccessful. Kyul found it disrespectful, but the master apologized for investigating, considering the young man's feats incredible. The man said he inherited Li Yunjin's staff after becoming the tower's master. He was intrigued to learn that Li Yunjin used a staff identical to his. Li Yunjin revealed he was a disciple of Kirisis. This left White speechless, especially since the master was a dragon, but Kuel asked the man to keep it a secret. The master was intrigued by the possibility of Li Yunjin being alive, as it would cause a stir in the magical world. He then suggested giving Li Yunjin a weight of the top of the tower, but the hero refused, as he had another mission. White realized how special Li Yunjin was for refusing something no mage would reject. The master asked Cal to accompany him to a special place. Then, he took him to a dark room, focused on defense against attacks from dark wizards. White wanted to know if Ilke intended to become the great master, since his mentor was the same as Lionel's. But this burden was too heavy for the young man, and White agreed, sorrowfully, for the 7 sages were not so united. Then he warned that there would be a festival at the tower, and invited Ilke to stay another day. The next morning, the disciples were staring at our heroes, but Lucy didn't care about the intimidating looks and continued to eat calmly. Lucy explained that of the 7 wizards of the tower, White was the only one at level 8. Then the MC wanted to know why there was a conflict among the masters, and Lucy told about the suspicion that some were inclined to build a city. Lucy supposed that this division would be a great opportunity for the dark wizards. Lucy, who had already finished her meal, showed impatience to go to the festival. Lucy wanted to continue the conversation, but the elf's look was intimidating. People were cheerfully strolling around the tower. Elysian wished McCann and Palm were with them, but one was fixing the cart, and the other was sleeping deeply. Amber and Lucy were getting along well, and when the MC noticed the approach of the black-haired girl, Lucy commented in a confidential tone that she was clearly interested in him. The young blonde, also wanting to show interest, offered a meat skewer to Lucy, and ended up having to pay for the food for the whole group. The day was pleasant, with everyone having a lot of fun, and Kagul found that break important. During the fireworks, Lucy took the opportunity to flirt again with the elf, and Amber asked Kagul if he would like to take a walk alone with her. The fireworks continued, but something in the sky caught the elf's attention. Meanwhile, Kagul noticed that the sound of the explosions was different. Suddenly, the tower began to explode from the inside out. Extraheen screamed, remembering that McCann and Palm were still inside. Then Lucy indicated that they should follow him through a secret path. Everyone was worried about what might have happened, until voices echoed from the tower, announcing an accident and ordering the population to evacuate the area. Unfortunately, the elevator was not working. Suddenly Kyle and Lucy found themselves surrounded by Pharrell, who swore to eliminate our hero. Kyle summoned his staff and handed Blackstream to Lucy. Then Pharrell called for reinforcements. Trump, one of the 7 sages, who arrived eccentrically, wearing a clown accessory on his face. Lucy was shocked by the betrayal, as was Amber. However, Kyle, who had no ties to the arrogant wizard, challenged him to a direct combat. Then Master Trump prepared a series of magical bombardments. Kyle told everyone to move away, while he conjured a shield and prepared the counterattack. The maneuver left the eccentric master surprised by Kyle's ability to execute spell sequences. The battle between the two extended, with lightning bolts fired in all directions. But for Kyle, it was just a distraction strategy. Meanwhile, Lucy suddenly advanced and delivered a lethal attack against the insane-looking sage, eliminating him without any difficulty. The disciples were in shock at the master's fall, but now they were the ones in a critical situation, suffering from the power of a deeply disappointed Amber. And to worsen their situation, Pharrell received a strong kick from Lucy directly to the face, while Kyle applied strong psychological pressure on the other opponent. Kyle threatened Pharrell, stating that if he didn't tell the truth, he would suffer irreversible damage to his mind. The blonde wizard began to confess that, since the promotion of young White, dissatisfaction had grown. Some older masters did not agree with the decision, so they planned to build cities around the tower to stage a coup. But White did not allow the construction, as he wanted to focus on recording magical teachings to elevate the academic level. However, the rebellious wizards had already recruited a good number of followers. Elysian, outraged, delivered a strong punch to the disciple for such betrayal. Until several disciples arrived at the scene, witnessing the dead master, Turiel decided to retreat quickly, taking Pharrell as a hostage. Then Lucy suggested they use a secret passage. While Lucy carried the prisoner, complaining about the wait, Turiel showed frustration, regretting agreeing to go to that festival. The group entered an emergency elevator, which Elysian noticed was larger than the main one, until they heard a crash. Lucy identified the sound as the impact of colliding magical forces, what made our protagonist apprehensive about what was happening at the top of the tower. They arrived banging loudly on the door of McCann and Palm's room, but no one answered. So just as a precaution, Lucy broke down the door. The two were inside, in a defensive position, thinking they were the enemies. Kyle, desperate, wanted to know why they hadn't evacuated yet, and Palm explained that some wizards had attacked them. But she and McCann resolved the situation, and even captured an enemy as a hostage, who kept accusing the group of aiding the dark wizards. Kyle demanded more information, and the hostage wizard claimed he was only trying to contain the enemy invasion. This left our heroes distressed, as at that pace the sage's tower would fall into the wrong hands. Kyle had decided to help protect the tower. Luki suggested they go to the central system to prevent more wizards from invading the place, for only Li Yunshao's successor had the authority to access it. Kyle remembered he had visited that place with White, and so he arrived at the dark room with his friends, who were left speechless. Limio touched a crystal ball, which read the mana, and granted access. Our wizard asked to see the situation of the tower, and the monitor showed various cameras with the invasion. He then ordered all the tower's entrances to be closed, and the system obeyed. Kyle commanded the system to find Master White, and soon the man was shown in a room, surrounded by enemy wizards. This left Luki and Amber in shock. White remained firm, believing that after his own death, the enemy would have his reputation destroyed. However, the mustached master was sure no one would suspect him, but he didn't know he was being monitored. Kyle then decided to restart the elevator system to take him to the room where White was, but he needed a mana device to connect. Luckily, Amber knew where such a device was, and announced to everyone inside the tower about the betrayal of the four masters, inciting the disciples to fight to protect the tower from the wrongdoers. Lucy then showed something that could be useful, gaining the approval of our protagonist. A large gate opened before the enemy wizards, revealing enormous golems to fight for the tower, which crushed the wizards with ease, until a fireball erupted in the hall, and a chief wizard ordered them to aim at the joints of the stone giants. This was Dominic, the sage of the Raiden Tower, who arrived with his minions. Kuehl received the transmission from Amber, who had reached the device, and Lucy promised it would be as soon as possible to activate it. Palm hoped the golems would delay the wizards, and Dominic insisted that the heroes come out and fight, but the rogue's concern was about the high cost of those stone creatures. Kuehl felt a bit regretful for having used the golems, and shouted desperately for the wizards not to destroy them, as they were very expensive. Li Yun revealed himself, dissipating the magic in the hall, while Dominic complained about the insolence, but Lucy arrived furious with her sword, and the wizard quickly teleported to avoid losing his head. But when he went to use his staff, Palm appeared with her whip to prevent the wizard's action. Then Makan grew in size in front of the man, and delivered a throw blow to the bald old man, forcing the disciples to surrender. Amber and Lucy returned with good news about the device, even though they were covered in grease. Then Cao decided to go with Lucy to help White, while the others resisted against the wizards. Lucian wished Li Yun wished get hurt, but the boy reassured the priestess as Lucy was with him. In the elevator, Cao wanted to know if the elf was afraid of the tower collapsing, but she showed no concern. However, Cao was terrified, and wished to hold the elf's hand to calm down. But at the moment of touch, the elevator stopped suddenly. Lucy suggested they use the stairs, while the sound of battle continued intensely. Then Cao had an idea, and since his master was the same as Leonol's, the mana flow followed the same pattern. Just like White's, who held the staff of the legendary hero, Cao closed his eyes to connect with Master White, and the allied wizard felt the energy flow through his being, while the enemies tried to resist such power. The mustached master was still standing, but recognized the wizard's strength, who ordered the opponent to surrender, but Side commented that he regretted choosing the young wizard as Leonol's successor, and concentrated his strongest fire attack. Cao noticed that White was in danger, and wished his mana would reach him. White felt Cao's presence and gladly received the energy. The thick mustached master sensed that White had recharged his mana, and, without hesitation, the supreme mage cast a death spell, leaving the opposing master unsure if he was in this dimension or another. And when the blood trickled down his face, he acknowledged that White was the strongest mage. Then before collapsing, he was certain he had made the right choice as a teacher. However, the battle was not over, for Edward, master of the Oakwood Tower, arrived imposingly, and revealed he was there to finish off White in the name of the great black mage leader. Kuehl heard his name from afar until he awoke next to Lucy, and so the two ran to meet White to help him. But the battle seemed to be ending, and it was unclear who had emerged victorious, until White stepped back, while the tip of his staff revealed a hidden blade that surprised old Edward. The master explained that Leon never used the hidden blade, because he wasn't skilled in fencing. The old man fell, and our heroes approached White, who was exhausted. Kuehl embraced him and said he couldn't die, as he had many responsibilities to take care of at the tower. But White insisted, even against LK's will, that he could take control of the situation, and confessed he somewhat regretted accepting that big problem. Then, due to exhaustion, White decided to lie on the ground with Kuehl to rest until the others resolved everything, and he fell asleep in a second. The protagonist, who was also exhausted, joined the master and closed his eyes, while Lucy watched them confused. When Kuehl opened his eyes, he was startled to see Amber leaning over him. She was worried but happy, as the boy had been in bed for almost 12 hours. The girl said that White was recovering from his injuries, and Lucy reassured the protagonist, confirming they had won the battle. Meanwhile, Elysian was healing the wounded, and Palm and Lucy were sleeping heavily. LK asked to see White, and noticed that the master was very debilitated. However, White mentioned that the Oakwood Tower might be under the influence of the Black Gate, because old Edward was receiving sponsorship from someone who had yet to reveal themselves. White was concerned about the loyalty of the sages, as 4 had rebelled, while 2 did nothing to help. Then, he thanked LK for the help, and the boy felt embarrassed. White commented that the magical weapons of the 5 heroes were reappearing, with only the shield of the king of mercenaries remaining, and deduced that the successors of the 5 heroes were being called to battle against evil. Therefore, he insisted that LK stay at the tower, judging that the boy would quickly reach level 9, but Kuehl just wanted to go home and needed to complete his mission. However, he asked the master if there was any power limit in the first pact with a demon, and White replied that it depended on what was offered in return. LK deduced that the enemy had free access to choose their demons, and wondered what kind of mage he would be. Later, White, along with his disciples, thanked the heroes for their help, but Palm was only interested in the rewards, and surprisingly, the Tower Master had a surprise for the group. He had enhanced the carriage, even adding protection against magic. Makon was impressed with the vehicle, but Palm didn't like it, as the carriage wasn't even hers. Luki said he was going with Amber to the kingdom of Kudrin to check if there were any infiltrated black mages. Kudrin sent regards to Leo and Jenny, and Amber, blushing, wished the protagonist would take care on his journey, as she would be waiting for him. However, even with Leo K disguising his interest, the Tower Master supported the romance between the two. The heroes continued their journey in the enhanced carriage, while Kudrin pondered when he would reach level 9, but suddenly, Makon stopped the carriage. An accident had just occurred. Then, Leo K and Elysian approached to help, but the men looked at the heroes with hostile expressions, and Kudrin didn't understand why the atmosphere had become so tense. The men were watching Lucy closely because she was an elf. Then, the thin-mustached man asked for help to lift the carriage, and with great effort, Makon lifted the heavy vehicle, leaving the men incredulous, because Lucy also lifted the other cart effortlessly. Elysian healed the man who was under the cart. The leader introduced himself as a merchant from Sullivan, which made Palm suspicious. Makon wanted to know what was in the carriage, as it was very heavy, but the man with the thin mustache did not go into details. However, Lucy demanded that they open the carriage, and revealed that she sensed the presence of an elf inside. Then, the chief merchant ordered his men to attack the heroes and capture Lucy, but they were no match for the mage, who immobilized them all. Palm took the opportunity to unleash her anger at merchants on the dishonest old man. Makon opened the carriage, and indeed there was an imprisoned elf. The girls, outraged, taught the man with the thin mustache a lesson, but Kuehl asked them not to kill him, so he could interrogate him. With the elf safe, Kuehl wanted to know where they were taking her, and Makon, indignant, shouted that selling elves was prohibited throughout the country. The merchant was terrified when Makon discovered that the group's destination was Redcal, a city that held illegal slave auctions. Lucy expressed the desire to go there to resolve the situation herself. Kuehl explained to the man that the half-elf was very sensitive about this type of issue, but he was perplexed when the captive elf said that Lee K had ruined everything. Palm was irritated by the ingratitude, but Elysian realized that the elf's imprisonment was part of a larger plan. She introduced herself as Leisha from the Victoria Forest, and said that her sister had been kidnapped by humans recently. Therefore, she allowed herself to be captured to save her. Makon asked about the elf's whereabouts, and the merchant revealed that she might be at the Clint auction. Lucy promptly decided to help her, but Lee K warned the girl about their mission. Then a basic argument occurred between the two. By majority vote, Lee K lost once again to the half-elf. Leisha noticed that Lucy was not pure blood, but did not want to argue, and thanked her for the help. Lee K grumbled about the delay in the journey, but Makon, calm about the logistics, just told the mage to relax. Elysian commented during the trip that there was a sanctuary in the city, so they could have support. They arrived at the abandoned city, and walked disguised among the beggars. Lee K asked if one of the drunks knew the sanctuary, but the man, outraged, did not want to answer. Then, another man who overheard the conversation said he would help, but Kiliel knew he couldn't let his guard down with the stranger. The heroes defeated the individuals who attempted an ambush. The man apologized, promising to take them to the sanctuary. They followed him, threatening to deal with him if it was a lie again. The informant realized that this time he had gotten the worst of it, until they reached the Temple of Shine, which was quite deteriorated. The man warned that Evans was not much of a talker, and quickly fled. Then, when they opened the door, Kiliel seemed to have seen a ghost. The priest, with his stained robe, said he was busy preparing dinner. Elysian asked if the man was the high priest. He, surprised to see Elysian, seemed pleased that the church had sent extra helpers, and with a broad smile, invited everyone in. Inside, the priest raised his hands to a desperate man, and applied healing magic, leaving Kili intrigued about why the church's priests were so physically strong. Evans said he had been working there alone for 10 years since the high priest was murdered, and the knights disbanded due to the oppressive atmosphere of the city. However, the church never sent help, so he decided to stay there and do his best. He trained his body hard to intimidate the bandits. Kuehl thought he would be very famous in his world, due to his imposing physique. Lugia told about her sister and wanted to know about the Clint auction house. But the priest was frightened, as elves in that city were in great danger, so the girl explained that the group was there to help her. Evans felt hope that there were good people in the world. As forgotten there, he felt like a coward. But Elysian made a point of praising the man for his determination not to give up on humanity. Evans said the auction was held in the pyramid-shaped building of the Clinton family, which now belonged to the Calsand, until someone from the Adonis family knocked on the church door and ordered him to hand over the elf. Kuehl deduced that the informant noticed the elf and called for reinforcements, so the priest decided to go resolve the situation. But the bandits did not want dialogue. Kuehl tried to convince them that there was no elf with them, but the man vehemently swore he saw the pointed ears, so the leader of the gang decided to check for himself, and the giant priest ordered everyone to drop their weapons before entering the temple. But the leader was undeterred, and ordered his minions to attack. Then, Evans invoked his power and began to strike the criminals hard. Kuehl and Elysian were impressed by the priest's skills, delivering powerful punches and kicks in all directions. The bandits knew the blows were effective, as they would leave them severely injured. Makan got excited seeing the cleric fighting and joined the combat, and Kuehl felt like he was watching a wrestling show. After the defeat of the wrongdoers, Kuehl wanted to know when the next auction would be, and luckily, it would take place that very day. Evans explained it would start at midnight, so they couldn't be late, because probably Leisha's sister would be in the basement of the house. Evans prepared his mace for the visit, which Kuehl found a bit intimidating. Then, they followed a dark corridor leading to the basement of the house, but there were some scary rats that started to run, and Lee K, frightened, suggested that Palm hunt the animals, since she was a feline, but she was more scared than he was. Then Makan took the lead and eliminated the animals. Evans mentioned that the Kalzan family had a very skilled sorcerer named Volent, and that the true head of the auctions was mysterious even to the family managing the events. Kuehl didn't understand why someone so skilled lived in criminality. Then, Evans explained that a noble had killed the sorcerer's entire family when he was young, and that's why he ended up in that city. Palm and Elysian didn't like the sorcerer's story, until they reached the entrance to the basement. Evans was the first to go up, and didn't identify anyone in the place. A guard was walking in the dark until he felt Palm's whip on his neck, and alerted the captive elves. Leisha shouted for her sister, Leisha, but the young girl was not in the cell. Then, a detainee said she knew where the elf was and could take them to her. Makan promptly opened the lock. The girl, however, let out a macabre smile that Leisha sensed from afar. But it was too late, and suddenly the prisoner stabbed Makan. Leisha leaped at the assassin, who dodged, and introduced herself as Catherine. Alicia went to help Makan, but the assassin had more tricks up her sleeve, and launched some darts to stop the priestess. Then, Kuehl conjured a shield, revealing to Catherine who the group's mage was. The mage tried to imprison the girl, who broke free faster than the magic itself. Then, he hurled magical missiles, but the assassin protected herself. Kuehl was surprised to see the opponent conjure magic, but in fact it was Volent who had conjured the block. Evans froze upon seeing the man behind the sorcerer, a Kalsand brute, who seemed pleased to see Shine's priests. Palm growled at the other men upon realizing they had been ambushed, and the trickster, once again, was behind it all. Leisha ordered them to release her sister, but the assassin, with a sadistic look, suggested they play hide-and-seek. Kuehl ordered the girls to flee with Makan, as he and Lucy would handle the bandits. Then Evans decided to stay and offer support. On the other side, Volent stated he would fight Kuehl, and ordered them to capture Lucy alive, but the heroine would not surrender so easily. Even with the enemies in a state of extreme fury, the assassin leaped at Lucy, who was intrigued by the opponent's speed. The girls also had their path blocked by the bandits. Then, the elf revealed her forest magic, and a fairy spirit suddenly advanced against the gang. Catherine, noticing the spiritual magic, ordered them to capture Lucy. Meanwhile, Kuehl was pitting his magic against the voracious sorcerer, and realized the adversary was stronger than he thought, mainly because he couldn't use all his strength in a confined space. So he decided to conjure a reverse gravity spell, but Volent stopped him, discovering that Kuehl was not a mage of cheap tricks. The sorcerer drew a sword and attacked again with fire spears. Kuehl blocked with a shield, but the smoke around was blinding him, until the enemy blade pierced the defense, almost hitting him. The sorcerer attacked from behind, but the hero managed to dissipate the blow, even without being able to follow him in his field of vision. However, Kuehl also had his strategies and teleported to the opposite side of the adversary. Kuehl was already irritated with Volent and prepared another attack. However, he suddenly fell, as he had been affected by the poison on the enemy's blade. While the sorcerer boasted, the mage cast a detoxification spell. He wielded his staff, making it clear that the fight would now be decisive. The sorcerer disappeared again, but Kuehl was determined to fight with full force. However, Volent reappeared, holding Kuehl's staff. He prepared to deliver a deadly blow with his sword. Suddenly, Qiaobei drew a hidden blade from his staff. He wounded Volent without hesitation, mentally thanking White for discovering this new function for the weapon. The sorcerer fell to the ground. Qiaobei drew ensured that the man would be permanently silenced. The girls were still blocked by the provocative trickster, until a fireball interrupted the bandits' advance. Qiaobei drew appeared, demanding harshly that they step away from the girls. The criminals couldn't believe Volent had been defeated. While Elysian did his best to heal Makan, Legia decided to continue the battle, determined to find her sister. Evans faced the giant Kalsand, who deemed the priest's work useless. Qiaobei offered help, but Evans wanted to settle the score with the opponent alone. Kalsand then smiled and dropped his cleaver for hand-to-hand combat. The priest did the same with his mace, promising to save the elf. He then flexed his muscles and called the other fighter for a one-on-one duel. The warriors began to deliver heavy blows, whose impacts were so violent they generated flashes. It was an extremely balanced confrontation until Evans invoked the power of Shine to defeat his enemy. The priest was enveloped in a luminous aura and attacked Khalsand again with sacred force. He applied a brutal grappling move, throwing the opponent. Zhao Bei cheered. Recognizing the technical complexity of the executed move, Evans subdued the enemy using only blessed strikes, and finished him with a crushing leap onto the fallen body. This left Lidzia perplexed by the physical violence of humans. Zhao Bei was impressed with the priest, and asked the elf to stay safe with him while he went to help Lucy. The girl resisted as best she could against the speed of Catherine's attacks. Zhao Bei informed her that only the assassin remained, and was ready to join the fight. But Lucy demanded that Zhao Bei step back, as she wanted to prove her own worth, and finish the fight alone. Catherine tried to resist, but Lucy advanced, covered by Riard's aura. She delivered impetuous attacks with the Blackstream sword against the assassin. With a precise strike she broke the enemy's dagger. Then she delivered a kick with the weight and force of a sledgehammer. The impact was enough to defeat the assassin, who fell spitting blood. At the auction the bids for Lisha only increased until a masked man offered 30,000 in gold. When the presenter was about to conclude the sale, he felt the fire lick his ear. Zhao Bei then appeared, stating that the charade was over, while Lisha ran to embrace her sister, relieved. Some men called for Khalsand and Volant, but Evans gave the bad news to the bandits and dropped Catherine in the middle of the hall. The men began to run, and Zhao Bei enjoyed seeing the group scatter. He decided to set everything on fire so there would never be slaves there again. Catherine woke up in the middle of the flames and charged at Lisha, full of hatred. But the elf, even more furious, cast her magic against the assassin, who turned to ashes without a trace. Evans watched the flames, saddened by the symbol of the city being destroyed in such a way, which left Lisha and Lucy frustrated, as the house should have been destroyed long ago. The next morning, Lisha woke up a bit dazed, but soon recognized her sister. The two embraced so happily that they even moved the tough priest. Makan was also recovered, and reported that the city was in chaos, as no one expected the Khalsan family to fall in such a way. However, Lisha was worried about the true leader of the auction house. Makan confirmed that the Clintons had a daughter, assuming she was the assassin in the basement. Evans bid farewell to Alishan, and said he intended to rebuild the city, making Lisha think the man would become a legend one day. The group continued their journey after another victory. Palm was frustrated, as once again she couldn't loot anything. Lisha mentioned there was a bag with 30,000 coins at the auction, and Lucy had taken it, but the half-elf left it as a donation at the temple, to the thief's despair, who ordered the carriage to stop. Then Alishan asked the girl to be quiet, because the elves needed to rest, but Lisha said it was fine, and assured that her people would reward them. This calmed the evolved treasure hunter. The group camped for the night, and Lisha thanked the heroes for their help. Kuel commented that not all humans were bad, and hoped the elf would trust him. Lisha blushed in gratitude, until Lucy heard something in the forest, and when arrows whizzed, they clashed against the protective magic the protagonist had prepared. Then, someone ordered the group to release the captured elves. Kuel, irritated, replied that they hadn't captured anyone. That's when Lilcia explained that they had been saved by the heroes. Then, the archers revealed themselves to be elves on a mission to rescue the sisters and apologized to the group. One of the elves was surprised to recognize Lucy, and said she was Rena, who had met the redhead in Alvenheim, but Lucy didn't remember. The leader of the elves asked who Lucy was, and Reno announced that she was Trinity's daughter. Lilcia was shocked by the news, and the elves recounted that they fought alongside the legendary heroine in the Holy War. Then, Lucy said her mother had mentioned the leader of the archers, and the elf was extremely astonished. The elves invited the redhead to visit the Victoria Forest, as the spirit Estina, who fought alongside her mother, was the leader of the place. The elves guided the heroes through the forest, which housed a huge tree, until Estina appeared and greeted the visitors, making Lucy happy to reunite with her aunt. Estina thanked the heroes for saving the Forest Sisters, but Kiriel stated it was all Lucy's doing. Estina was delighted to meet a heroine from the Battle of the Three Generations, but Elske didn't know the story of that war. Then the priestess explained that the Holy War lasted for 3 eras, and Estina was in all of them. The elf added that in the first war, Sistar, Emily, and Lionel fought. Then, when there was the battle against Ragdam's 4th disciple, the prince didn't want to abandon the castle, resulting in many losses. Thus the 3 heroes emerged and defended the castle for a month, until reinforcements arrived, with the elves, forming the first alliance between men and elves against Ragdam's forces. Estina was modest, and said that despite the elves' help, it was the heroes who held much of the war. And looking at the group, she commented that they reminded her of the 5 heroes. Then she called Kuel for a walk in the forest, and the young man soon became almost breathless. When they reached a waterfall, the elf asked if the protagonist was Lionel's successor. Kuel confirmed, and Estina recounted that if it weren't for the Supreme Wizard, they wouldn't have won the battle, because Ragdam was hit by a technique that delayed his plan to open the gates of hell. Kuel commented that evil was returning, and for the elf, humanity still had no idea how difficult that period was. Lelike asked for advice, and the elf explained that humans needed to resolve that battle, and that's why Trinity had sent her daughter Lucy to help the mortals, because she carried the abilities of an elf, human, and dragon. Then she asked Lelke to protect the girl. When he returned, the half-elf wanted to know what the boy had discussed with the elder, but he just changed the subject, and asked if the friend missed her parents. But Lucy was calm and wanted to know if LK also missed his family. Then the MC realized that even their faces were fading from his memory. His heart tightened, and a tear fell. But when Lucy noticed, he disguised it, saying it was an insect in his eye. Lucy felt the friend's pain, and hugged him, asking him not to hold back the tears, for not every tear was a bad thing. And so she promised to help him find all the pieces so he could return home. Then there under the moonlight, LK cried. The next morning, the group said goodbye to the elves, and Kill, more cheerful, asked young Lisha not to get lost in the forest. The little elf blushed, and our heroes continued their journey, until Lisha ran out shouting the MC's name, and stopped, giving a final farewell. But Lisha felt a bit jealous of the girl. Then Kill took out his magic tracker, and the group set off for the territory of Suin, a place with a lot of snow and a harsh climate. Our video ends here. If you liked it, leave your like. See you next time. Bye bye.